From Matthew chapter 17, beginning at the first verse. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and the brothers James and John and led them up a high mountain where they were alone. As they looked on, a change came over Jesus. His face was shining like the sun, and his clothes were dazzling white. Then the three disciples saw Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. So Peter spoke up and said to Jesus, "Lord, how good it is that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for Moses, one for Elijah, and one for you." While he was talking, a shining cloud came over them, and the voice from the cloud said, "This is my dear son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard the voice, they were so terrified that they threw themselves face downward on the ground. Jesus came to them and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." So they looked up and saw no one there but Jesus. We know what it is to see someone have a cosmetic makeover that transforms the person's appearance. A new hairstyle, makeup, wardrobe makes all the difference. A person who loses a great deal of weight from a change in diet and exercise rather than illness may take us by surprise, a pleasant surprise. A home may be completely renovated, and it may be a truly wonderful transformation. These are external changes which make all the difference, but this transfiguration is a different matter. The glory of the Lord that is hidden from our view, the disciples. The divinity of the Lord is on display for this moment in time. This is what he gave up for us, and what he exhibits once more after his resurrection and ascension. When he comes in all of his glory for the second coming, then everyone will see him as he really is. We all have the Holy Spirit within us, but we have to choose to allow the glory of God to be revealed by confessing our sin and need of a Savior, repenting to be ready to change direction, embracing the presence of God in us, and allow the Holy Spirit to lead and guide us in the right path. This is inner transformation. It means a change of heart. We pray for you, our national leaders, to reflect God's glory for us. Every day, you are lifted up individually and collectively by many persons praying for you. We pray that your decisions will be the best possible under these trying circumstances. We pray that you will model for us Christ-like character and godly family life. We pray for your healing from life's hurt and the forgiveness of your enemies. We pray for our people to be disciplined and to work hard to nurture their children using godly principles, and to have a vision for the future that espouses integrity and decency. May every visitor to our shore feel this land to be holy ground, and may each one have a personal encounter with the Holy Spirit. Let us pray. Our Father, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever.
Good morning, honorable members. Honorable members, when the business of this House suspended on the supplementary appropriation capital development accounts bill and the midterm budget, the honorable member for Fox Hill had reserved the floor. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reserve the floor for the member for Killarney.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair now recognizes the honorable member for Killarney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think I'm enlightened and happy to wrap up this mid-year budget debate after spending a few days of very productive and enlightening time in Barbados at the Caracas meeting. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to offer my contribution to the debate on the 2019-2020 mid-year budget performance statement. And I do so, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the wonderful people of Kalani, whom I've had the privilege of serving in this chamber since 2007. Straighten the microphone. Straighten it up. Can I hear? But I want to remind the people from Kalani that though they may not necessarily see me on the ground door to door with my team as they are so accustomed to, I have greater responsibilities traveling throughout the length and breadth of the Bahamas, moving through New Providence and other constituencies, but my heart still remains with Kalani. And as my representative and agents of my constituency, members of the executive team and support staff continue to move through Kalani, they move through on my behalf and they speak with my voice. And any concerns that they encounter in Kalani, concerns that the residents and constituents of Kalani may have, those concerns are brought to me and they are dealt with as quickly as possible. So I hear their concerns with great regularity. The Speaker, in the constituency of Kalani, unlike Town and many other constituencies, we have just a limited number of churches, and excluding the Catholic Church, just Laipati area, and the Anglican Church in a similar area, we have approximately 6 churches within the Kalani constituency. And the Speaker, it's not unusual that the churches make great contribution to the Kalani constituency. There are many outreach programs and their youth programs to help guide our young people in the right direction. And some may even have counseling, mentorship, and food programs. And Mr. Speaker, the work that the churches do, I am unable in my capacity as a representative to duplicate or do what the churches themselves perform and complete. And therefore, as a program and a policy of the constituency in Kalani, each and every church in the Kalani constituency are given yearly, of which we've already commenced, a minimum of $5,000 per year, and that is utilized to help them. Now that is very difficult for some other constituencies to do, because as I've said, I've only have 6 churches, excluding Catholic and Anglican. I have no schools other than Gambia. I have no health facility other than Gambia. So we don't have the challenges that many other constituencies have. But Mr. Speaker, if anyone drives the Kalani constituency, you'd see that our basketball court near the Nesbitt restaurant is near completion. And in fact, it's already being utilized by the young people, not only at my constituency, but the young people from throughout the length and breadth of New Providence. And we still have minor work to be done, completion of repair of the fence and the little cabana attached there. Crime has been an issue that we faced within the Kalani constituency, home invasions, break-ins, etc. And I must commend the police. I've spoken with the police, and since then we've had an increase in visibility and police presence within the Kalani constituency. And the complaints related to crime, I understand, has somewhat increased, but I'm certain that the police is not concentrating just on one constituency. They're concentrating on the entire Bahamas. That is New Providence as well as the Family Islands, inclusive of Grand Bahama. And they're doing an excellent job, because I think the police need to be commended. Then the new subdivision, Twin Lakes, I toured that area yesterday and toured it with great regularity once I'm in town. And I'm happy as to the progression of the infrastructure within Twin Lakes. This is a community within the Killarney constituency where individuals have built their homes, haven't built in a subdivision. And the developers, for some reason, never completed the infrastructure. So Bahamians were living in homes with no proper road, no proper water, electricity, etc. And that has been a fault of government in the past. And I've always felt, Mr. Speaker, that if government gives approval for any subdivision to be developed, and we find ourselves in a situation where the infrastructure is not completed, then that is government's responsibility. Government should fight the courts on behalf of the people. That should not be the people's responsibility. Government is responsible. So, Mr. Speaker, I must thank the Minister of Work, who has been very gracious in assisting me after I've been complaining about this particular subdivision since 2007. But the minister has been very gracious in ensuring that the subdivision, the infrastructure is being placed in. And that would mean that homes in that particular area, the prices, as I listen to reports from the real estate industry, the prices, I'm certain, would probably escalate by an additional 40%. Then we're challenged with noise pollution, Mr. Speaker. Individuals build homes in certain upscale, middle-class areas, and they lease their homes out for parties and other functions, being a complete nuisance to neighbors. It was a challenging matter, and I've had ongoing discussion with the Attorney General and other legal fraternity, and I've advised my constituents to call the necessary meeting, look at the conveyance, the ordinance, after which send the particular notices to the relevant individuals, after which we take out an injunction against individuals within our community who continues to bombard us with these noise pollution. So we are dealing with that. And then there's the issue with South Ocean. There's a great development to occur in South Ocean, and yes, I have not had the relevant and necessary meetings with the residents of South Ocean. But as I stand here today, be assured that I will call a meeting with South Ocean so that they can be updated and completely involved in whatever development is occurring within the South Ocean constituency. But as more information is obtained by my office and the government, South Ocean will not be left out in the cold. Mr. Speaker, as many of my fellow honorable members stated in their prior contributions, the devastating impact of Hurricane Dorian is unprecedented in the history of our country. Damages, losses, and additional costs are estimated at approximately $3.4 billion. And beyond the financial and economic impact, this catastrophic event has forever changed the course of the country in terms of public policy and public administration. Mr. Speaker, a tragic and calamitous event such as Hurricane Dorian, which had an unparalleled impact on our country, requires an unmatched and purposeful response by the government. And today, Mr. Speaker, I can say with great honor that my government is doing exactly that. Unlike our immediate predecessors in office, who experienced 4 hurricanes during their term and failed to adequately restore this country and our people. My government is implementing a host of fiscal and economic policies to help our citizens to rebuild their communities and to restore their lives. We established, for the first time in the history of this nation, special economic zones for the affected areas, which allow residents to benefit from tax exemptions and concessions on business license, VAT, real property tax, and the free importation of approved items under this program. No government, Mr. Speaker, has ever done this in the aftermath of a natural disaster. If it is an unprecedented policy accommodation, it is an unprecedented policy accommodation, and one that is essential to restoring the lives of our fellow Bahamians. Mr. Speaker, my government also ensured that hurricane victims were able to access cash resources to begin restoring their lives. And one of the ways we accomplished this objective was by facilitating the expansion of the National Insurance Board unemployment benefits from 13 to 26 weeks. The government's allocation of an additional $11.4 million toward this initiative means that eligible victims who lost their jobs as a result of the hurricane can continue to receive financial support for a longer period. In addition, Mr. Speaker, my government allocated approximately $10 million to micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises through our Small Business Development Center to assist businesses that were impacted by this monster hurricane. To date, the Small Business Development Center has approved $3.2 million in funding to those recovering businesses. That is, $3.2 million going directly to the Bahamian economy to restore sustainable livelihoods. $3.2 million helping to reignite the dreams that Dorian attempted to steal. $3.2 million, Mr. Speaker, invested in and for the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, with our response to Hurricane Dorian, this government has distinguished itself from the previous PLP administration. We initiated a comprehensive assessment of damages and costs within 2 months of the storm, unlike others. And once the assessment was completed, we disclosed the results to everyone to see and showed how the impact would alter our fiscal projections for the current fiscal year. This is presented in our fiscal adjustment plan as mandated by the Fiscal Responsibility Act and in the supplementary budget. We have also presented our additional contingency spending in a transparent manner, unlike some other administrations. An outline of these spending imperatives is included in the draft estimate for the supplementary budget, as well as in the 2019 Fiscal Strategy Report tabled in this Honorable House in November of last year. In contrast with preceding administrations, my government chose to present the fiscal impact of Hurricane Dorian in a supplementary budget. And while we had the option to simply adjust our projections during the midterm statement, we chose to deliver on our promise of transparency and accountability by detailing how the spending of each ministry, department, or agency would be altered, and by detailing how revenue collections for the central government would be impacted. I cannot, Mr. Speaker, say the same for our predecessors. At the time of the 2016-2017 budget communication, the previous administration projected a deficit of $100 million. Hurricane Matthew hit several months later in early October 2016. Later that month, they brought to Parliament a resolution to borrow an additional $150 million that was supposedly to be used to defray recovery costs associated with both Matthew and Hurricane Joaquin from the year before. By March of 2017, when they delivered their midterm budget, the fiscal deficit had already jumped past projections by nearly 3 times at $275 million. Again, they attributed this to Hurricane Matthew. They changed their estimate not once, not twice, Mr. Speaker, but 3 times. Their projections for the full year were later revised to $350 million. And if that is not enough evidence of incompetence, the story gets even worse. At the end of fiscal year 2016-17, the deficit jumped to a whopping $660 million, nearly twice the size of their revised projection at the midpoint of the fiscal year. The Christie Davis administration failed to accurately and competently assess the economic and fiscal impact of Hurricane Matthew. Even up to 5 months following the storm, they also failed to inform the Bahamian people of how the hurricane funding would be spent. And they failed to properly account for how it would impact the country's fiscal health. I would also add, Mr. Speaker, that even 4 years after the storm, the Bahamian people still do not fully know how the hurricane money was spent. In fact, I can announce today that people are still writing the Ministry of Finance inquiring about payment for services they performed for government related to the 2016 hurricane. And the Ministry of Works. And Ministry of Works. On our watch, Mr. Speaker, programs such as Small Home Repair Program are ensuring that individuals and families receive direct funds to facilitate their repairs, thereby mitigating the risk of mismanaged funds by some on behalf of the government. We on this side, Mr. Speaker, will ensure that the public receive a detailed report on how hurricane-related funding is being used, including donations and pledges. Mr. Speaker, at the outset of the 2019-2020 budget, my administration projected a deficit of $137 million, which has now been expanded to $677.5 million to account for hurricane recovery spending, revenue loss, and a number of other spending imperatives. Our government debt, which was forecasted at some $7.6 billion, is now anticipated to stand at approximately $8.2 billion at the end of June. We realize that these figures may seem daunting, but I can assure this House and the Bahamian people at large that my government has a plan to restart the economy and restore the lives of our Abaconians and Grand Bahamians. on the massive package of tax breaks and economic incentives, Mr. Speaker, that we granted in the wake up of the storm, this government has pioneered a number of foreign direct investment projects that will create jobs for Bahamians. And these projects will produce new and exciting activities that will attract more tourists to our shores and ultimately help to propel our economy to a full rebound. Our commitment to restoring the lives of our fellow Bahamians goes well beyond this fiscal year. And as outlined in our fiscal adjustment plan, we expect that fiscal recovery will take approximately 5 years, although economic recovery is expected to continue beyond that horizon. The return to normalcy is no small task, but my government is certainly up to this task. Our brothers and sisters will feel the solidarity of this government beyond this year until the lives are restored and all that Dorian attempted to strip them off. We will uplift our people, Mr. Speaker, and equip them with the necessary resources to achieve restoration and building greater resilience. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to invest over the medium term in key infrastructure in Abaco, the Abaco Keys, and Grand Bahama, but also in the other family islands. We recognize that as a government, it is our duty to create opportunities for economic growth. Investing in capital projects and critical infrastructure is one way we are doing this. These measures, Mr. Speaker, will provide some buoyancy to the economy and mitigate the extent of the projected slowdown in economic activity caused by Hurricane Dorian. And our prospects are promising, and we have full confidence in our overall economic recovery strategy. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, most importantly, our hearts are set on achieving stability in this country and building a resilient and sustainable Bahamas. Our track record shows that we are capable of proper, prudent, and responsible fiscal management. And today, I can assure the Bahamian people that this government will remain committed first and always to their needs. We will not waver in our efforts to rebound from this tragedy, but will press onward, marching together to a common, loftier goal. Mr. Speaker, when we look at the headwinds facing some of our economic sectors, there is, in the near term, increasing reliance on performance in our tourism sector, which continues to be vibrant. Last year, we broke the 7 million mark in a number of visitors. Mr. Speaker, I challenge the Minister of Tourism to now march fast and forward towards the 8 million mark. Mr. Speaker, upon my return from Barbados, I was surprised yet happy upon seeing that after landing, there was a long taxi waiting line for aircrafts to reach into the main terminal and be taken to the proper jet bridge. Mr. Speaker, that shows the number of aircraft visiting our shores. So it was timely and responsible for us to construct the new runway that was just recently completed. But, Mr. Speaker, the airport was so crowded with aircraft that there were no jet bridge for many aircraft, including our own, to come in. But there was an auxiliary space to accommodate such problems should they arise, and our aircraft had to be parked in such auxiliary space so that we could have disembarked. Mr. Speaker, that was good news for me, and it was a pleasant thing to see that our economy, Mr. Exuma, is doing great. Mr. Speaker, we are embarked on a number of innovative and exciting initiatives to accelerate our tourism business. This includes establishing pre-clearance facility in Florida to enable pilots to fly directly to their destination of interest in the Bahamas instead of being diverted to one of our relatively few ports of entry. According to the operators of the two locations planned for these facilities, they expect a 15 to 25% increase in incremental traffic to the Bahamas. We expected to see more activity in a number of our more remote family islands as a result, and increased incomes and benefits to our citizens who live in those areas. And Mr. Speaker, we are boosting non-stop air services from new markets and increased frequency for services from existing markets as we seek more ways to stimulate more business and satisfy demand for existing interest in traveling to the Bahamas. At the same time, we are seeking ways to improve the quality and level of services at a select number of family islands airports, and will be reviewing proposals for private-public partnership in the development of those airport facilities. We have been told that the Bahamas has more airports per capita than any other country in the world, and we are exploring ways to develop those airports faster without relying entirely on the public purse to get them up to the required standards. Mr. Speaker, I have heard and read commentary that it is highly improbable that we can get unemployment down to 6%. Mr. Speaker, we need to think boldly and with greater vision and imagination, which is lacking in the leader of the opposition and his visionless party. We need to rethink and innovate when it comes to economic model that some rigidly propose for tourism development. We need to update our thinking about the economics of tourism. According to some, the only path to rapid employment is the construction of a very large resort. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the economic model that assumes this is not the only path to rapid employment in the tourist sector. Many may be surprised to hear that there is an existing property with wonderful amenities and 6,300 vacant rooms that sits empty every night in the Bahamas. Here's how we make that property visible. I repeat, Mr. Speaker, 6,300 rooms, such property sits vacant every night, but it's our intention to make that property visible. There are approximately 18,000 hotel rooms available in the Bahamas for the accommodation of visitors, with annual occupancy of these rooms hovering around 65%. That means that we have, on average, 35% or 6,300 rooms vacant every night throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And Mr. Speaker, some assume that maximum average annual occupancy of hotel rooms across the Bahamas cannot exceed 65%. And when that level is reached, the country needs to start looking for new investments. That is a wrong assumption, a completely wrong assumption. We need to remind the skeptics that not so long ago, properties on Paradise Island with more than 1,000 rooms regularly ran occupancy of 85% year-round. Those skeptics also need to digest the fact that cruise ships arrive in the port of Nassau with near 100% occupancies year-round. We must focus even more to make the adjustment to move the occupancy needle beyond 65%. Suppose, Mr. Speaker, let's just suppose we move hotel occupancy from 65% to 85%, not 100%. 85% occupancy would mean an additional 3,600 rooms occupied every night in the Bahamas. That is equivalent to filling a property 1.5 times the size of Bahama every night. An additional 3,600 rooms occupied every night. A double occupancy would mean an additional 438,000 annual stopover visitors with an average length of stay of 6 nights. And that's why I am confident that Freetown will achieve 8 million visitors. Mr. Speaker, with each visitor spending the average $1,500 per visit, moving occupancies from 65 to 85% would mean an additional $657 million in incremental visitor expenditure in the Bahamas. And when we look at the data showing the number of direct, indirect, and induced jobs that would be created by such an outcome, the 6% level of unemployment is achievable from tourism sector expansion alone, and without building one more room in the Bahamas. But Mr. Speaker, let's go even further. We must strengthen and enforce our immigration policies. We must pursue illegal immigrants aggressively. This is the Bahamas, and Bahamians are first, and Bahamians will and must remain first. I have given the Minister with responsibility for immigration the task of establishing a strike force whose mandate would be to aggressively pursue illegals both throughout New Providence and the Family Island, through our streets and at various job sites. Bahamians who employ illegals will and must be prosecuted. We cannot continue along a lawless society if we are to protect our citizens. Jobs are first and foremost for Bahamians. Mr. Speaker, I find it very difficult, and I could not understand and still not understand today when investors, bankers, etc., bring individuals to our shores on contract for 3-4 years with the commitment that they would train Bahamians to take over such jobs. And 6 years, they are still here. 8 years, they are still here. 9 years, they're applying for residence, displacing Bahamians. Mr. Speaker, I find it difficult that my nationals cannot obtain the knowledge to take over the job. And since I know that my nationals can and do have the knowledge to take over the job, the fault must be with the trainer. And the Speaker, we are to aggressively ensure that succession planning is first and foremost, and in the absence of individuals not properly being trained, that trainer had failed and must be replaced by a new trainer so that they do not establish foundation within our country and take further jobs away from our citizens. Mr. Speaker, I also find it very difficult to accept individuals who come to our shores as employees on jobs, subcontractors, or employees. When I look 5 years later, these individuals established their construction company and compete against Bahamians for our jobs. Mr. Speaker, I am embarrassed sometimes. I walk about and see the amount of individuals who speak different language than I do, but yet have big contracts within our country. That must stop. Bahamians first. But the citizens, Bahamian citizens, are likewise responsible. We have a responsibility to inform the government as to such activities. And we have a responsibility of not hiring individuals unless there's document of them being here or allowed to be here. We do not, Mr. Speaker, want to reach the situation that we now see in the Turks Island. And the government of Bahamas and the government of Turks Island are working together to ensure that our borders are safe. Mr. Speaker, Turks is being inundated or swamped with illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants now outnumber the residents in Turks. And yes, CARICOM has established a committee, of which I am a part of, to travel to Haiti to assist, to help in resolving this problem. But the residents in Turks are so fed up that they themselves are capturing the illegals, tying them up, and taking them to the authorities and requesting that they be deported. Mr. Speaker, I would not like to see us reach that point, and therefore I urge Bahamians that you have a responsibility. You must not hire illegals, and you must report such illegal activities. And for those who bring individuals on work permit, you must ensure that they have proper accommodation. We will not continue to allow shanty towns for individuals to break the laws in our city, in our country, yet we do nothing. And if a Bahamian adds anything on to his or her home without the relevant permit, we break it down. I ask the question, Mr. Speaker, who is this country for? Are we second-class citizens in our own country? Mr. Speaker, if we were, we will no longer be second-class citizens in our country. And I ask the courts to work with us. Let's solve our problems. Because today it's me, tomorrow it's you. Soon they will build a court next to the Supreme Court. And what do? Leave it alone? Leave it alone? I still complain of a resident in my constituency who built a building 3 stories. He was permitted 2 stories. He went against our laws, 3 stories. A Bahamian used all of his resources, and yet he cannot open his place because the law states that you only allow 2. But individuals build shacks all over. Oh, please. I have to slow down, Mr. Speaker, because you know, my boys know how I go. They know how I go. But, Mr. Speaker, we can no longer be second-class citizens in our country. We must take our country back. Work permit cannot and should not and will not be obtained within our country unless those that are being renewed. We will do regular audits of those work permits to ensure that work permits were issued while individuals were out of the country. And if anybody is discovered to be in violation of our policy, they will be dealt with accordingly. Our social services can take no more. Our health system can take no more. Mr. Speaker, I remembered while working as a physician in the Princess Margaret Hospital, in charge, senior personnel for obstetrics and gynecology. It was not unusual, which was very frustrating to the staff and demoralizing. It was not unusual. 10 deliveries within our wards, 9 were the illegals, and 1 was the Bahamian. It was not unusual, Mr. Speaker, that our wards, our beds, were filled with illegals, while Bahamians stand aside, sit on the benches, waiting for a bed. Who is this country for, Mr. Speaker? Who? When I look at the word Bahamas, I would think that it means Bahamians. And we must deal with that, Mr. Speaker. But I am certain that my minister with responsibility will deal with that appropriately. And therefore, I again urge Bahamians that your government cannot do it alone. We all have a responsibility. And very soon, the Minister of Foreign Affairs will be meeting with the relevant authorities from the Turks Island, Turks and Caicos, so that we can man and assist each other with our borders. You know how embarrassing it must be for a Prime Minister, while sitting in his or her office, to see hundreds of illegals running across the street, running across the yard of the office of the Prime Minister, and it's very difficult for them to deal with it. We do not want to be placed in those situations. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, when we increase the occupancies of existing properties at satisfactory room rates, more investors make money, and the Bahamas tourism sector becomes an even more attractive place for local and international investments. While we will continue to attract new investments in the tourism sector, as you will have heard as recently as 2 weeks ago, we really do not need any new investments in mega resorts in order to get the reduction in unemployment targeted. We set a projection of 6%. We will pursue that 6%. And many Bahamians who believe in us would assist us in achieving that goal. It makes no sense, Mr. Speaker, to say we will bring down the unemployment rate. I have learned from the private sector that we set goals, we set objectives, and we work towards those goals. And the government will do accordingly. But, Mr. Speaker, this is not all. The fastest growing segment of accommodations in the Bahamas is not being provided by hotels. The fastest growing segment is the peer-to-peer accommodations being provided by such companies as Airbnb. What we are discovering and what our visitors are enjoying in Airbnb type bookings is a commercial form of our highly successful and much celebrated people-to-people program. We are seeing more visitors in traditional neighborhoods walking around in areas than we have seen in the decades. Mr. Speaker, when I go visit my barber on East Street, I'm always amazed to see the number of tourists walking the streets in the given area who live in Airbnb accommodation, East Street, Gibbs Corner, and wherever else. They're penetrating throughout the entire New Providence, Mr. Speaker. They are not only enjoying accommodations in these many areas, they're enjoying the other amenities in their locale. The hotel licensing unit is already exploring ways to ensure that the safety, the location, the condition, and the host of these properties add to the positive reputation of our Bahamas, and also ensure that the appropriate taxes are being collected. Again, Mr. Speaker, we need to recognize that these visitors are being hosted by Bahamians with accommodations they have already built. So there are accommodations already here that are being utilized, extra rooms. There are accommodations that have always existed, awaiting a way for them to be put to productive and commercial use. And many Bahamians hosts are entering the tourism business directly and receiving revenue directly in ways that used to happen decades ago, although not as efficiently. Yes, Mr. Speaker, there are now people whose full-time self-employment is the hosting of visitors in this rapidly growing sector. And many more of our visitors are getting to know our people, not only in hotels in the traditional tourism zones, but also within our communities across the country. It seems that the community tourism that we have hoped for is beginning to happen in a way that we did not anticipate. We must focus on finding ways to remove the impediments in the way of increasing utilization of the thousands of rooms that go unused on average in the Bahamas every night. Some of the impediments that we have identified are more entrenched than others and will require more effort, but these efforts are underway. Mr. Speaker, we are touching the future and helping thousands of Bahamians by promoting greater access to Crown land and through bold new initiatives in education. Our mission is to ensure that Crown land is used in a fair and equitable manner, having due regard to the need for appropriate environmental and sustainable practice. The Department of Lands and Surveying continue the surveying of Crown lands to ensure outstanding freehold, that is, Crown grant, documents are concluded, and to identify suitable tracts of Crown land for transfer by Crown grant to the minister responsible for housing to facilitate the development of government serviced residential lots in Family Islands and in New Providence. The department is also identifying suitable Crown grant tracts for residential subdivision purposes in post-Hurricane Dorian, both in Abaco and Grand Bahama, to be surveyed and subsequently granted to the authority for design, infrastructure provision, and home construction. Mr. Speaker, while in Barbados, my delegation and I, which included the member for Bain and Grantstown, visited a subdivision that was built with resilience. And so that the entire Bahamas can hear, some may interpret that it was a waste of funds or too large a delegation in that I included certain individuals. I want the Bahamas to hear that our government believes in succession planning. We've made a policy that for every international event meeting that the Prime Minister travels to, a member from the backbench would accompany the Prime Minister, so that member is exposed in the running of government, international organizations, policies. And the member from Bain and Grantstown had accommodated me to such meetings. It allows him to converse with the leaders of the other countries, the other nations. It allows them to see the working of government, the working of the United Nations, European nations, etc. And Mr. Speaker, that is essential in terms of succession planning, because my cabinet colleagues have an opportunity to attend meetings themselves, and they expose themselves. But one day, one of the backbenchers may sit on cabinet side, but they would have been exposed. Not only that, one day, a member of the backbench may stand or sit in this chair, but again, they would have been exposed. But Mr. Speaker, what was amazing, we visited one of the developments that was built for resilience and sustainability. These were homes that were built on piles with some forms of cushion attached to the piling, which allowed for flexibility of movement of homes. So in the event there's flooding, water can just traverse without damaging the homes. But in the event of an earthquake, the homes are mobile without being damaged. And we would all remember that just a few weeks ago in New Providence here in downtown, we had experienced an earth tremor for the first time that I can recall, and many would not have known how to respond, and our buildings would not have taken those factors into consideration. So with the progression of climate change, Mr. Speaker, we can expect more, and we should be proactive and build with resilience. Mr. Speaker, what was even more amazing, the homes were well built to withstand winds of 180 to 220 miles per hour. The roofs were likewise built, but they were built, though low income to middle income, they were built in a gated type fashion, designed with open space, designed with town centers, restaurants, supermarkets, and other amenities, game rooms, school, preschool, an environmentally friendly environment. And this, Mr. Speaker, would give opportunities for new entrepreneurs in terms of owning such facilities, as opposed to the same individuals we currently. But the garbage collection is done in such a hygienic manner, an organized manner again, gives an opportunity for individuals to just go into that type of business. So, Mr. Speaker, we are looking at establishing and conveying to the authority the relevant land so that the authority can commence such a project. And this would happen both in Abaco and Grand Bahama. The authority will soon be visiting Barbados, speaking with the relevant individuals so that they can receive more information as to how this can develop. You must take into consideration, Mr. Speaker, that we have given the mandate that these housing development must be cheap and affordable to the average individual. You must remember that the land does not carry a cost. That's a part of the package. The infrastructure, we're hoping to be placed in by our pledges and donors, again, would be a reduced cost to homeowners. Then as we are in a tax-free zone, disaster zone, there'll be no duty and other incentives, which mean there are no reason why we cannot bring the homes down. But Mr. Speaker, I do not want to go on record to say how much the homes, similar homes, had cost each individual in Dominica, because that would cause a scare, not a scare, a degree of elation within the Bahamas that I would not be able to control. And therefore, I would withhold that information until the appropriate time. But the question I had asked, can such homes and facilities be delivered with that degree of resilience and sustainability? Can they be delivered with our labor within the Bahamas for less than $80,000? And the answer, Mr. Speaker, was yes. Mr. Speaker, the authority would be visiting soon. But in the meantime, until that is done, the 51 lots in Central Pines that are multifamily will be conveyed to the authority. Those lots have all the infrastructure and amenities in place. Housing will be asked to convey those lots to authority so that we can commence construction immediately for individuals to have homes. I'm also informed that in eastern Grand Bahama, that there's also a subdivision with 52 lots with infrastructure in place, excluding street lighting. And we would enter discussion with the Minister of Finance, the member for Eastern, as to how we can make this available and accommodate his constituents as best as possible. After all, Mr. Speaker, we are one Bahamas. The Department of Lands and Surveys is seeking to incorporate electronic computer advances such as online access to departmental services. Also, new modern surveying equipment and training in the correct use thereof, and vehicles are being procured to ensure efficiency in the workplace and improve service to the public and to reduce the backload of applications. In consultation with the Land Reform Commission, the Department of Lands and Surveys has continued to review the Land Surveyors Act 1975 and its associated regulations, which have not been revised since 1975. The Department of Lands and Surveys is seeking trained personnel so that both the needs of both government and the public may be addressed in a timely fashion. It is envisaged, Mr. Speaker, that this will include the development of training programs in conjunction with education institutions to attract young persons into the land field and utilizing, for example, scholarships in areas of drafting, land surveying, and land management. Mr. Speaker, we have been aggressively trying to grant individuals their crown land, crown grant. There is a shortage of surveyors within the government. And for some reason, even governments run into obstacles in achieving their goal. There are many surveyors within the private sector, and I'm certain that they are listening to me. There are land grants we want to complete in Inagua, Meguana, Exuma, Eleuthera, Andres, and throughout the Bahamas, but we cannot complete without the proper conveyance. And therefore, those individuals in the private sector who are licensed surveyors, we ask them to kindly contact the Office of the Prime Minister, Lands Unit, so that we can hire them, so that they can do the job that's necessary, so that Bahamians who have applied for land and Bahamians who want land can achieve their land, Mr. Speaker. It takes approximately 4 years to train a surveyor. We have sought and communicated with many institutions. But the time is long, and it's essential that we are assisted wherever possible. So we are requesting individuals to contact us so that we can assure and ensure that our young people who want to engage in businesses, to come forth with great ideas and entrepreneurship, are given a head start. At least the land, which is crown land, is their land. It's not my land. It's not anybody's land. And we must ensure that they have an opportunity to own land in this country. Mr. Speaker, I spent the entire weekend in my office, the Office of Prime Minister, and I am embarrassed when I review files, land files, and I see individuals owning 1,000 acres of land, crown land, to do what? And these young people at University of Bahamas and others cannot get 60 by 80? What are they doing with the 1,000 acres? Files and files, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to cry to see what they are doing to our people. They are greedy. They are hoarding land for themselves and their families with futuristic planning to convert to subdivisions.
Let's take it back.
It cannot happen, Mr. Speaker. It should not happen. Too many of our young people are crying for assistance. This government came in with the mandate to assist Bahamians. We said it's people's time. And it is the people. 60% of our population is less than 45 years old. 60%. That's a grouping we cannot ignore. We must assist them so that tomorrow they would be prepared to take over and run this country efficiently. Mr. Speaker, the PLP promised to double the national investment in education and training. They did not. Indeed, on the Christie Davis watch, the educational budget was cut. The FNM is distinctly and fundamentally different. Last August, my government fulfilled a pledge to increase tuition-free access to tertiary education for qualified Bahamians. For qualified Bahamians through the government tertiary education grant program. To date, approximately 2,900 of almost 5,000 students enrolled at UB are benefiting from this program. Mr. Speaker, that means that 2,900 individuals, if they were paying, it meant that their families would have made even greater sacrifices in paying these fees, but now that it's free, those individuals can divert that money for other things that they may have wanted to do. Of that number, Mr. Speaker, 178 individuals are receiving an additional $500 per month as residential grant to help defray the cost of housing for qualified students who must relocate to UB. Mr. Speaker, that's why it's so necessary and important to travel to family islands. You become a part of them. You become a member of the family, and you know them on a personal basis. And because they know you personally, they're open to you. They are very open with you. And many things they would have hidden, they would now inform you. Too many of our family islanders were making great sacrifices in sending their children here to do Providence to UB. And they were sacrificing many things at home, in many instances food, light, etc., to ensure that their kids, the ones that were sent to New Providence, were in a safe and hygienic environment and at the same time had something to eat. Mr. Speaker, recognizing that, it's the responsibility of the government to ensure fair play and quality of life remains the same for all and remove as much of the stress and strain from each and every family that they can. And that was why, Mr. Speaker, it was essential that the government ensure that every student coming from the family island was given $500 to assist with their accommodation. Now, Mr. Speaker, I would have heard while I was off and upon my return that this government, especially I, do not understand the suffering of the poor. But I want all to know that I know what it's like to be 25 cents short. I know what it's like to be 50 cents short or $1 short. I know what $10 means to a poor man. I know what $50 means to a poor man. Mr. Speaker, after all, my mother was a lunch vendor at Columbus Primary. And on many occasions, I used to assist my mother selling lunch. And many students that came to that school did not have funds to purchase lunch and did not have lunch. And my mother was the type of person, Mr. Speaker, she would have given her heart to others before she gave to us. And she ensured that those children who had no form of lunch or finances, she ensured that they received something to eat. That's what I was exposed to, Mr. Speaker. And I got accustomed to waking up 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning so that I would assist my mother in preparing her lunch. And in those days, when students paid, you would be surprised the big bags of change that you would bring home because they paid with coins. They would count out their pennies, 5 cents, etc. So now, Mr. Speaker, I know what it's like to be short of change and short of funding. We have made a commitment to elevate the poor and the underprivileged. We have made a commitment to protect the account and the finances of the people. We would never, ever make a decision that is not transparent and is not in the best interest of the people. We would never be irresponsible and spend the people's money wisely. That is why we account to this Parliament and to the people of every dime that we spend. I would never waste and abuse my own personal funds. I certainly, and this government certainly, would not do it with the people's money. So no, Mr. Speaker, we know and we recognize what it is to feel pain and not being able to do what you see others are doing. You learn to live with what you have and do as best as you can. And the government will assure that it does everything within its power to try and level the playing field. So, Mr. Speaker, again, as I listen, I hear many say that the FNM, this government, is not a government for the poor. We've done nothing for the poor. They are a government who believe in handout, and they believe that's how you help to elevate the poor and the underprivileged. I want those who can hear that that is not the way to help you for tomorrow. Giving you $10 today for whatever reason will not necessarily help you tomorrow. We've heard the words of Nelson Mandela in terms of how do you eradicate poverty and uplift the underprivileged and the poor. And then while in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, we had an educational group comprised of professors and labor union representatives. And they've done research on how to elevate and assist the poor. And the number one entity that you can do to assist and elevate the poor is not giving them $5 or $10. Number one was education. And that was why it was so essential for us to make tertiary education free to the Bahamian people. To make BTVI free to the Bahamian people. And Mr. Speaker, it's projected that at least an additional 10% students per year will be added to tertiary education grouping. That means those 10% who would not have had an opportunity to be educated and to uplift themselves will have that opportunity. And that was why, Mr. Speaker, we made it necessary to ensure that those from the Family Islands have the same advantage as those here in New Providence. That's why we're assisting them with their monthly housing stipend of $500. And of course, you know that the university has just announced the groundbreaking of their new housing complex. And those coming from the Family Island would automatically have $500 contributed towards their accommodation within the university's new housing development. And I am certain that the Minister of Finance, a very gracious and kind-hearted man. You know, Mr. Speaker, from time to time, I watch in cabinet my colleagues attacking the finance minister because he's very tight on the funds. But he insists that he is holding to protect the country, and he is holding back to protect that 60% of our population who is less than 45 so that we leave them with a better environment. So I am certain, Mr. Speaker, that if more than $500 is needed for the Family Islands, he will comply. After all, he is a Family Island man. And Mr. Speaker, yes, I mentioned that 178 students are taking advantage of the $500 grant. But Grand Bahama is included, but post Hurricane Dorian, an additional 13 students was added. They had to move from Grand Bahama here to New Providence, and they too were given the grant. And it's projected that every year there would be an additional 15% students added to that. Then, Mr. Speaker, recognizing it also pointed out by great leaders and at the CARICOM meeting by university professors, etc., their research showed, which we knew, that you must have proper preschool education in order to give them a great start. We have a society today, Mr. Speaker, where those who can afford proper preschool education are given preschool education. But that is not the society that I want to live in. That is not the society where it's a preferential society for the wealthy, for those who can afford it. And because I can't afford it, because I'm the son of a lunch vendor, I could not afford it. It meant that I should not be granted such facility. No, Mr. Speaker, when leveling the playing field, we must ensure that those who do not have it will have same advantage of those who can. They in turn must have the same advantage and starting at the same starting block as Life at Key. Why should we run the 100-meter dash and those that have money start at 80 yards and me with none start at the start line? It's unfair advantage. So the government recognized that, has decided to make preschool education free to all its citizens of the Commonwealth. The great United States of America is going along the same line, recognizing the preschool. But, Mr. Speaker, we also recognize that the government does not have sufficient schools, buildings, facilities to accommodate this. We recognize that. And therefore, we have asked individuals who has such facilities, once in the private sector, once they are accredited and meet the standard, apply. And students, each student, they would be paid by the government of Bahamas $700 per month to ensure that our students are properly educated. But yet they say we did nothing or we're doing nothing for the poor. Mr. Speaker, the Family Islands are dear to me. You know, every weekend I try to go to the Family Island. It's relaxing. I love the Family Island. The Family Island people I find very friendly, very loving. They love me, and I love them. And I wanted to go to the Family Island this weekend. In fact, I want to go every weekend. And then they tell me I have to go to some hard ball on Saturday. I said, Jesus, Lord, that's going to interfere with my life. So I'm checking my schedule. I said, well, I can go to whichever Family Island I choose on Friday and spend Friday there and rush back to Nassau so that I can put on a tux and accommodate the Minister of Health to his hard ball. But I will be in the Family Island. I love the Family Island, Mr. Speaker. And it's essential that the Family Island has the same benefits as New Providence. After all, we are one country. We are one Bahamas. And we recognize that in the Family Islands, there may not be adequate facilities. And therefore, to assist the Family Islands, the government is inviting all of those individuals with knowledge and certification to teach our preschoolers, once certified, those in the Family Islands. Apply to the government. We will give you the Crown grant. We will give you the land to build your school, your preschool. We will allow you to build duty-free and bring your equipment duty-free. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, after building, we will pay you $700 per month per student. And you say we don't like Bahamians? So, Mr. Speaker, we want to ensure that the playing fields are leveled. Mr. Speaker, the FNM added classrooms to accommodate more preschoolers. We partnered with 44 approved private preschools to accommodate an additional 800 preschoolers. Our policies helped improve GLAT scores in language arts by 5% from 2018 to 2019. We distributed more than 2,700 tablets, 100 laptops, and 100 projectors in public, primary, and preschools. The FNM started a tablet pilot program at Anatole Rogers High School. The FNM launched a $17 million technology upgrade in public schools. We are developing tech-smart campuses with Wi-Fi capabilities. The FNM completed construction of new schools in San Salvador and Rumkey. The FNM expanded 5 schools in New Providence with new classrooms, computer and science labs, and art rooms. We are upgrading the BTVI campus. And Mr. Speaker, with hard work and God's guidance, we have rescued the Bahamas from the calamity, the corruption, and the disaster of the Christie Davis. I think it's Ragged Island. What's your last name now? Cooper. Cooper-led government. The PLP, Mr. Speaker. No, I was disappointed. No, he was supposed to run for us.
Okay.
He had the nod to be our representative in Exuma. And I was lying down in my bed. And I saw him in a yellow jersey walking across. I said, oh my God, what the hell is this? He double-crossed me. He'll still take you back, though. I know you want to come back. Your blood. Your blood.
Look to the left. You mean your left and his right.
Exuma and Ragged Island, I know that red runs through your vein. We still love you. We promised you we'd fix Ragged Island, and we are doing that. We promised you we will give you a new airport, and we are doing that. We promised you we will give you new road network, and we are doing that. And finally, we promised you that we will take your seat, and we will do that. Mr. Speaker, the PLP, which is still smashed and battered from colliding with the reef of scandal and poor governance, remains a broken party with past scandals seemingly exploding again. Every time the FNM comes to office, we have to rescue the Bahamas from the PLP. We have rescued our Bahamas, and we are rebuilding it for the benefit of all Bahamians, not just an entitled PLP elite and their cronies. We are lifting all boats and building a fairer Bahamas. Over the next 2 years, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to grow and to recover from the economic wasteland left by the Christie Davis Cooper administration. It is our privilege, it is my privilege to serve the people of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the people of Kalani for supporting me and having the confidence in me, for sending me to this place since 2007. I also thank you, Mr. Speaker. May God continue to bless and to guide our Bahamas. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time when committed. A bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on the revenue account during the fiscal year commencing the 1st of July 2019 and ending the 30th of June 2020. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money on what frame the expenses of the government of Commonwealth of the Bahamas on revenue from the fiscal year from 1st of July and ending the 30th of June 2020.
Further second reading and committal of bills. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further second readings. Mr. Speaker, actually, yeah. I take that back, Mr. Speaker. We do have two. Which one we debated? We did the revenue. Yeah, so we'll do the capital. Okay, Mr. Speaker, I do now move that second reading be done on the supplemental appropriation capital development account expense bill 2020. Second.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for the capital development for the fiscal year commencing the 1st of July 2019 and ending the 30th of June 2020. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money on what frame the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on capital development for the fiscal year from 1st of July 2019 and ending the 30th of June 2020.
Further second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
At this stage, Mr. Speaker, I do now move, there are no further second readings, Mr. Speaker, and I do now move that the House resolves itself into a committee of the whole with the Deputy Speaker in the chair.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House now resolves itself into a committee of the whole with the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House in the chair. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The House will now dissolve itself into a committee of the whole House with the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House in the chair.
Why you think Peter need help, man? Mr. Leader?
Committee of the whole. As many. Put that over here, you go. As many. Chair recognizes the member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Chairman, I do now move that the long title of the bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on revenue account during the fiscal year commencing 1st of July 2019 and ending 30th of June 2020 be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chairman, we're having some technical difficulties with the sound system throughout. And so I would move, Mr. Chairman, that the House suspends for about, that the committee of the whole suspends for about 5 minutes so that we can seek to rectify our audio and visual issues.
Mr. Chair, I second that. Been moved and seconded that the business of this committee of the whole be suspended. As many members as in favor remain seated, those opposing will rise. Business of the committee of the whole is suspended for 5 minutes. All right. I think we're up and running now. I heard the Prime Minister, the member for Kalani, spoke so highly of the Honorable Minister of Finance. Minister, please shine upon us in this house. Before suspending, the member for Bamboo Town was on his feet. As many. Chair recognizes the member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do now move that the short title be agreed.
Chairman. It's been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that clauses 2 and 3 be agreed.
Chairman, I second that. It's been moved and seconded that clause 2 and 3 of the bill be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated, those opposing will rise. Clause 2 and 3 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, we now move to the schedule. And in the schedule, we're going to start with head 6. Well, I take instructions that I'm being advised that we're going to move that heads 6 through 74 be agreed.
I second that, Mr. Chair. It's been moved and seconded that head 6. The chair recognizes the member for Exumas and Ragged Island.
I just seek clarity so that we're on the same page. I want to ensure that we have an opportunity to ask questions in relation to all of the heads. And subsequent to this process, we will then move to the actual book to discuss the line. I just want clarity on the issue, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, we will pose those questions at the start.
Mr. Speaker, for the members' clarification, we are at the book. That's the schedule. So we are now at the schedule. You can look at the bill, and those are the requisite heads. As I've said, I've moved that all of the heads from head 6 to 74 in the schedule on the expense side be agreed, recurrent expenditure account.
The chair recognizes the member for Exumas and Ragged Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, in relation to, I appreciate the response by the leader of government business. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we will proceed with our questions from the expenditure side. And Mr. Speaker, firstly, we note in many of the heads, and I am specifically now referring to the expenses, that there is a line item called current transfer NEC, and there's a line called special financial transactions. Within these lines, through many of the heads, Mr. Speaker, there are, in some instances, very large amounts that's not broken down in any detail. I wonder whether the Minister of Finance would assist us in explaining what generally these are in relation to before we come to some specific questions.
Chair recognizes the East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, special financial transactions are generally contracts that are issued, various contracts that are issued. They used to be called in the former administration used to be called development contracts, but it's a variety of contracts for various services that the government. We can go through them head by head. And in respect to the transfers, that's transfers to the authorities and to government corporations.
I hope that assists us, Exumas.
Grateful, Mr. Speaker. The Speaker, in relation to Head 6, we note that we went to Head 6, and presumably this is because there are no changes in the previous heads, Mr. Speaker. But we are now on to Head 6, and there is a line item 22710EE on
227.
operational expenses. Mr. Speaker, we note that the explanation previously that the significant changes relation to Hurricane Dorian is noted in the Office of the Prime Minister. And we wonder whether the minister would explain the $637,000 being allocated for the Cabinet Office, and whether the increase in travel subsidies for spouses and the per diem for Cabinet members are included in this particular line item.
Chair recognizes East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's very cute by half. But I would just advise the member that notwithstanding any changes in the per diem, there has been no change in the overall travel budget for cabinet ministers in this budget or in the supplemental budget. There's been no changes. So in other words, the travel budget itself, the overall number, has not changed in respect to cabinet ministers. With respect to the specific question, the biggest item that is included in that is $531,000. That is for relief food and supplies in respect to Abaco and Grand Bahama. As you may know, NEMA is included in the Office of the Prime Minister and Cabinet Office, and this is to deal with specifically relief of food and drinking water and ice in those two areas with respect to the hurricane recovery efforts. Also included in that is $96,000 with respect to the travel costs for technical people that was necessary as a result in the follow-up and assessments of the hurricane damage immediately following the storm.
Anything else, exhumers? We are looking at 6 through 74. As many. The chair recognizes exhumers in the Ragged Island.
Go ahead.
The chair recognizes the member for Cat Island, Rum Kingston, Salvador.
Yeah, on Head 8, I note allowances. Now, Head 8 deals with the judicial, with the Supreme Court and Magistrates Court. And you have, allocating an increase of $46,000 for allowances for the Supreme Court and Magistrates Court, Office of the Judiciary. What is that about at this time?
Mr. Speaker, of that 46,000, 36,000 relates to rental accommodations for a magistrate in Abaco as a result of being displaced from their normal accommodation.
Okay. To be to fix some things that were not, to correct some of the issues from the old, from the budget of 2019-20. For example, travel and subsistence for the Court of Appeal at 9 or 15,000. I mean, don't forget now, this is an adjustment period and all these unexpected or unforeseen expenses. 15,500. What's that about?
Mr. Speaker, it would be.
I mean, you can look at the
Hold on, you want me to answer that, right?
Head 9. Maybe you can look at 10 as well. and talk about the allowances of 10,000 for Registrar General's Department and services of 2,000.
Mr. Speaker, again, the member opposite will find that the answer to most of his questions are similar. And that is, this is accommodations for Hurricane Dorian, either in terms of travel of persons to do assessments, or for accommodations for people who would have been dislocated from their accommodations as a result of catastrophic damage to either their residence or their offices. In the case of the question about the 15,000, again, it is to do with the magistrate courts and travel in Abaco. In respect to the 10,000 for the Court of Appeal, Registrar General Office, it is to do with overtime to replace documents for persons who would have lost their documents during the storm.
You recognize Mr. Exumas right now.
In relation to Head 12, we note that the Prime Minister has announced that the campaign season has begun, and we saw no allocation in relation to any parliamentary registration increases. And we also know that we're still handwriting the parliamentary voters card. And I wonder whether there is a allocation somewhere else other than the Parliamentary Registration Department for this, or whether these reforms are already included in the budget for Head 12.
Mr. Chairman, again, to restate, this budget, the supplementary budget, is primarily related to Hurricane Dorian recovery efforts. And so where there is not a direct correlation to Hurricane Dorian expenditure, you'll likely find that there is no adjustment. In respect to the question that he's asking about the Parliamentary Registration Department, there is a budget that was approved during the annual budget exercise last year. Those numbers still stand.
Ken Island Rumpkins in Salvador.
Head 14.
There appears to be a new allocation for operational expenses under the Office of the Prime Minister, 1.5 million. Could you advise as to what that amount is all about? I mean, and what it is supposed to cover?
East Granbama.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's 2271 0EE.
Is it operation expenses?
The $1.5 million allocation in the Office of the Prime Minister is in response to fund the new ministry, the Ministry for Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction.
Chair recognizes Exumas in Ragged Island.
I don't want to belabor this issue, but if the Minister of Finance would use perhaps this head as an example and explain specifically for the Parliament the special financial transaction amount of 250,000 and the current transfer NEC of 181,000.
Which head you're looking at, Exumas?
I'm still on Head 14, Mr.
Okay.
Speaker. The two last lines.
Yes, okay.
If the Minister or the Prime Minister would be so kind to explain what's included in those lines, Mr. Speaker, that may give us some precedent when we get further down, and we'd like to expedite this process.
Yes, I'd like to help you. Mr. Speaker, as I indicated, the special financial transactions normally refer to contracts for consultancies or other services that the government would engage in. In this particular line, this is in regards to technical assistance that the Office of the Prime Minister through the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction would have engaged in the assessment of the hurricane damages and losses and works that need to be done to repair infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. In respect to the 181,000, it refers to salaries, advances that we allowed for our staff to help them to get resettled after the hurricane, as well as a lump sum payment. As you know, all public servants were given $1,000 if they were in the disaster zone, and so that would also cover that.
Mr. Chairman, Minister, you see, there's a challenge with the answer to this one. The challenge is this. There is a line item that was approved by Parliament in the last budget debate for consultancy services. Right? For consultancy services, the amount that we approved and the line item that was approved in the last budget for the 504,000 had nothing to do with consultancy services. That was provision for contingency, which we never identified. So the real question is, right? And we don't see, and from the expenditure from that line item, we were unable to determine what was in fact expended. To be able to understand why would that 250, now you say the 250,000 not for contingency, but rather for consultancy service. So perhaps it's in the wrong line item.
Speaker, again, you know, I'm sure the member is trying to do his best to create mischief. But again,
Point of order.
there's
Point
no
of order. Point of order.
there's no mischief here.
Point of order. Point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw it.
No. What point of order?
Member from East Grand Mountain withdraw the statement.
Yeah.
All right?
I want to say this.
Yes.
Right, I am looking at his document. And if he's not familiar with his document, do not ascribe any motive to me that is not to bring some clarity and understanding to his document. His document that we approved has a line item, and it is 225-11115 from the budget we approved. Right? And it has consultancy services. The question about the 250,000, you are suggesting that is for contingency services. What I'm pointing out to you, for you to try to align your response, so that we'll understand, is that the 504,000 that was approved in June by us, by Parliament, related to what is called provision for contingencies. You have made a distinction between provision for distinct
Speaker's elected, or is he asking a question?
No, I was explaining myself there.
You did a good job.
He's round bound. He's round bound.
Speaker, the simple answer to the question is, as I said from the outset, this budget is in respect to Hurricane Dorian. It has nothing to do with the expenditures that we would have already approved in the original budget. Those expenditures still exist or still planned. So we are continuing with the existing budget, and this supplemental budget is additional expenses that are intended to address specifically consultancy in this particular circumstance with respect to the hurricane. And that's all.
And so, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, what I'm pointing out to him is that when you look at the structure of our approval, when it first came from the original budget, right, this line item spoke to provision for contingency, not for consultancy. The consultancy line item is number 225-1115. And so the question is whether or not you are not allocating this in the wrong line item.
I think the member,
because of your own explanation.
The member, if you haven't already answered that, can you clear up?
Yeah, I think it's answered.
It's answered.
There's nothing more to answer.
Chair recognizes Exumas and Ragadani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that the Leader Government Business has asked for approval of a significant number of heads at one time, we ask that you forgive us if we happen to.
We're going through them. We're going through them. We're going
Yes,
through them.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, continuing on the thought in relation to the line current transfers NEC. I don't want to misquote the minister, but I believe he indicated that the item under the office of the Prime Minister was in relation to new consultants. If we move to head 21 and we look at the similar line, we see, Mr. Speaker, $16.1 million in the line item current transfers NEC. And I wonder if this is in relation to consultancy. Well, the minister will explain. But if it is in fact related to consultancy, head 21, page 57, the penultimate line, 28210EE, 16.1 million. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, I would ask whether this is in relation to new consultants. And if it is, Mr. Speaker, perhaps the minister would provide further light on this number, as it is very significant.
Northeast Random.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to get back to the member on that particular item. I believe that is the transfer to Lucayan Holdings, but I just want to make sure before I answer the question. So I'll come, if you permit me, I'll come back to that. 16.1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, East Random. I'm Exumas, Ragged Island.
Mr. Speaker, I trust that speak to the need for a bit more, let me say, transparency in the lines, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, we want to know specifically what the expenditures are related to. But just on the question of the consultants, Mr. Speaker, when the minister comes back, I wonder if he would provide to Parliament and to the Bahamian people a list of all of the consultant contracts entered into, firstly. And secondly, for the Bahamian diaspora who might have significant experience and want to contribute to the development of the Bahamas, whether he would provide to Parliament a list of future consultancy that's forecasted to be entered into. When he comes back, Mr. Speaker, on the other points.
You come back in 2022 on the same head.
You sure he's coming back?
Can I live from Kings El Salvador?
21.
21, yes.
Head 21?
Speaker, there seems to be a new line item. Subsidies for public 25110EE.
Subsidies for public non-financial
Public non-financial
corporations.
corporation, 11 million. Right, this is a new line item. and it seems to me that we ought to, to have not been able to determine that this would be needed prior to the presentation of the annual budget is a shocking revelation. But perhaps, and Mr. Speaker, might I also say this is recurrent in a number of the heads. So perhaps when he speaks to this, it might avoid me having to ask questions under all of the other heads. The necessity and why this new line item is now being, as was settled during this adjustment period.
Thank you, Mr.
East Random.
Again, Mr. Speaker, this 11.4 million is in respect to the extension of the NIB benefit for the unemployment program. The program is such that NIB is picking up 50% of the extension, and the government of the Bahamas is subsidizing the other 50%. So this is 11.4 million to subsidize the unemployment insurance for the.
Under this head.
Yes, that's it. For NIB.
Thank you, East Random.
Also,
Can I live?
we also see a $30 million head of 22810EE, special financial transactions. $30 million adjustment. What is that related to?
East Randolph?
11 is related to the unemployment benefit. What is the 30 million related to?
The 30 million is related to skills enhancement program for this is a projection. This one isn't exactly firmed yet, but it's part of an IDB loan for skills enhancement, the $30 million. That resolution has not come to Parliament yet, and so we're making provision for it. The other, and just to get back on the 16.1 million, the 16.1 million is in fact the subsidy for Lucayan Renewal Holdings.
Speaker, we would be, Speaker.
Chair recognizes Zuma's Rama.
Mr. Speaker, on this
Second.
point, we would ask the minister to clarify, because we would not wish for the public to go away with the explanation that this government is coming back to borrow an additional $30 million, which seemed to be what was suggested, Mr. Speaker. So would the minister clarify whether, in addition to the $587 million being borrowed today, whether there is a plan by this administration to come back this term before the substantive budget to borrow yet another $30 million?
East Randolph.
Not necessarily. We are trying to work this within the current budget outline, but I would not stand here and rule out the possibility. But at present, we're trying to scale that program back so that it fits within our existing budget framework.
So just sorry, Mr. Leader, just for absolute clarity, is the minister saying that in addition to the $587 million being borrowed, that this government does not rule out coming back this period to borrow an additional $30 million?
No, Mr. Speaker, the 30 million that we're looking at here is included in the 587. As you can see, it's included in the budget, supplemental budget already. So this would be more of a question of where you get it from, what's the source of the funding, rather than a new borrowing per se.
But, what I did with that? This is for skills jobs program, $30 million. Is it anticipated that between now and this last half of the fiscal year, you'll be extending $30 million on that program? If in fact, as you said, it's just an estimate, you're not quite sure what you're going to do yet.
Mr. Speaker, if I can come back on that particular point, because it is not anticipated that we will spend an additional 30 million between here and the end of the year.
Why budgeted it?
I'm going to come back to you on it, because I'll come back to it. I might need to clarify something.
Zuma's in Ragged Island.
Speaker, in relation to Head 24, I'm a little troubled, Mr. Speaker, because I believe I read in the public domain that the recent labor force surveys excluded Grand Bahama and Abaco. These are completed by the Department of Statistics covered in Head 24. This is rather unusual, although there's been unusual circumstance, Mr. Speaker. We don't see any significant allocation to correct this anomaly for the next time this survey is conducted. You see, Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying is that when we compare the unemployment rate, it is the unemployment rate for all of the Bahamas. We do not have the luxury of excluding Abaco and Grand Bahama because there's been a hurricane. In fact, we must include them. There's even more reason to include them because of the devastation. But, Mr. Speaker, I don't see any allocation here to correct this anomaly And we can't have this continue, Mr. Speaker.
He's Grandma. That was a statement or question?
That's the question, Mr. Speaker.
That's a question. What was the question?
We want to know, Mr. Speaker, where is the allocation? Where's the allocations in the supplementary budget for the correction of the surveys to include Abaco and Grand Bahama? Because I don't see an adjustment here in the relevant heads.
East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First off, again, this is a supplemental budget. So the items that would have been related to the ordinary operation of government would have been included in the original budget. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the member is quite right that in the last census that we took, we did not include Abaco and Grand Bahama for obvious reasons. In 2020, there is anticipated to be the 10-year census taken, and in a census year, the unemployment this year, 2020, and the census year, normally the unemployment statistics is not done because it's all wrapped up in the census data. So you would not find a specific special budget for that. Again, it's not done in a census year. It's included in the census, the cost to take the census.
Get out and Rumkeen, San Salvador.
Head 22, I see an extraordinary increase. Well, that's where they want it. You jump in allowances for Treasury Department from 416,000 to some 5 million. Allowance
22.
21120 EE. That seems extraordinary. Over $4 million increase in allowances for the next 6 months. Don't forget now, these adjustments covers just the last 6 months of the fiscal period.
Yeah.
And you're going to be spending in allowances for the Treasury Department now, not the other department.
Yeah.
Right? Over $4 million.
Again, Mr. Speaker, if the
Treasury now.
yes,
For their function.
again, Mr. Speaker,
That can't be
the
done.
member would again recognize that there was tremendous damage in the Abacos and Grand Bahama. As a result of it, officers were displaced. Offices and furnitures and all the rest of it would have been destroyed.
Allowances.
Yeah. So allow me to answer the question. So you have, Mr. Speaker, a cost to accommodate those officers in alternate accommodations,
That's right.
as well as the travel back and forth to accommodate the services in the area. So that would be the bulk of that. Equipment had to be repurchased, et cetera, et cetera.
Get out and Rumkeen.
That's
San Salvador.
You know, you have a line item. Line item called travel and subsistence. You have a line item called rent. You have a line item supplies and materials. You have a line item furniture and equipment. Right? You have them all there. The question is, and then you have this line item for allowances. So there's a distinction between allocating for travel and subsistence, rent, and all that. And the question is, why are you now rolling it up in this? Right? Why would you roll all that up under the heading allowances when you do have the line item from which you could have allocated? It seems like smoke's and mirror. It's not transparent.
No.
Am I correct? Don't we have a line item that says travels?
He's going to address it right
Yeah.
now.
Mr.
He's
Speaker,
Grandma.
Mr. Speaker, the member does have a point. The $5 million is actually the $1,400 allowance that was given to every civil servant that was in the eligible pool of persons in the previous year.
That's right.
5 million.
No, but you said, right, in
You
your,
asked me about the.
yeah, but in your statement, in your budget statement, you said, let me find it, sorry. That's fine. In your budget communication, you said something different.
Who's speaking? Get Allen or Exuma's on this?
He's on
The chair recognizes Exuma.
Mr. Speaker, whilst the leader of the opposition assists the Minister of Finance on that point, Mr. Speaker, I wonder if we would move to Head 26. Mr. Speaker,
26.
Head 26 is in relation to public debt servicing interest. And this is a head that's has caused much consternation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we, as a backdrop to the question, we pointed out in my presentation on the matter that the government has borrowed $3 billion since it came to office. We note that under the supplementary estimates, there is an allocation of $5.5 million for debt servicing in addition to what was budgeted previously. And it's very difficult to tie back to the loan amount, Mr. Speaker. So I'm wondering two things. One, whether the minister would provide the average rate and terms on which the 587 million is being borrowed, firstly. And secondly, whether the minister would provide a list of all loans restructured, along with their details, the rates, and the terms of those restructurings, Mr. Speaker. It is very difficult for one to discern how or whether the 5.5 million is adequate to support the 587 million of new borrowing, as well as any increased costs as a result of restructures.
Mr. Speaker, that obviously we are in the process right now of getting approval to borrow these funds. We would not know what the final rate is until such time as we go out in a formal way to the market to determine what the rates are going to be. Again, if you were to use as an indicative, it's probably going to be around 5%. If we consider what we've been able to get in the bond market previously. But again, this is an estimation because we do not have the final indications yet of what the mix of the loans may be and what the fixed interest rates may end up being. So we estimate what we consider to be a reasonable figure for the interest cost as a result of this additional borrowing.
Speaker, there was a second question in relation to restructured loans. I can repeat it if the minister wishes, but I believe he inadvertently did not respond to that one.
East Grand Bama, do you remember the question? Can you restate the question?
Mr. Speaker, the question was in relation to restructured loans.
We need, it's just a question. We don't need the whole.
This is the question, Mr. Chairman. May I proceed?
Yes, Exuma.
Mr. Speaker, in relation to restructured loans, the question is whether the minister would lay on the table or provide for us a complete listing of all of the loans that have been restructured, along with the terms and the rates of those restructurings. Mr. Speaker, the point is that we want to examine whether these restructuring process and facilities, whether they are beneficial to the country, firstly, and secondly, whether the supplementary estimates are adequate.
Again, Mr. Speaker, in respect to the supplementary budget, again, it is an estimation of what the professionals believe will be an indicative additional interest burden as a result of the loans that we have to engage in as we are getting approval for it now. With respect to the listing of all of the debts that are outstanding, all of the bonds, all of the loans, Mr. Speaker, that is included in the annual budget. it will be included in this annual budget. And the member will have all the information he needs to know with respect to the interest rates, the terms of the individual loans and bonds that are outstanding by the government.
Yes, good. Thank you, East Grand Mama. Exumas and Ragadan.
Mr. Speaker, on that point, I wish to register my dissatisfaction with the response, Mr. Speaker, and put the minister on notice that the Public Accounts Committee will be calling for that register. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, you don't need a Public Accounts Committee for this. This is already outlined. If you were to go back to the
1 second.
if you were to go back to the annual budget, he would have seen all the loans that the government had outstanding. Again, Mr. Speaker, the same thing will be available at the next annual budget. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't know why you would need a Public Accounts Committee for that, unless you make the wild leap that the Ministry of Finance is somehow concealing, hiding the amount of loans that we have and the rates and the tenors that we have, which would be crazy. In fact, it would be illegal. So I don't know what the member is trying to get at, but every loan that the government of the Bahamas has is included in that budget.
Mr. Speaker, just for clarity, the member for East Grand Bahama should note that I made no suggestion of anything untoward, Mr. Speaker. But, in the interest of transparency, Mr. Speaker, we were requesting the details. No doubt the budget at the time would not have provided the details of the loans restructured during this current period. So I'm asking the minister, in the interest of transparency, to simply provide that information for us. And if he provides it, then the Public Accounts Committee won't call for it.
Mr. Speaker, again, there has been no loans restructured in this term. We have, in this particular borrowing resolution, to convert short-term paper to long-term. That'll be a part of this exercise that we are currently engaged in. So again, the answer to the question is all of the details of all of the loans, all the liabilities will be outlined in the annual budget. And the member will be able to acquaint himself with all of the details in that.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker, just to assist the minister on this point, I believe that the minister indicated that there was 80 million.
Yes, from short-term to long-term.
Converted from short-term to long-term.
As a result of this.
So in effect, that would be a restructured item. And we're just asking the minister for the details on it, the interest rates, what the new term is. We want to be helpful in determining whether the supplementary allocation is adequate, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, again, Mr. Chairman, again, I thank the member for trying to be helpful, but I think he's missing the point. We have not engaged in the long-term refinancing yet, and so there is no rate and there's no details to give him. We have said that we have 80 million of short-term loans that we want to convert to a long-term. As soon as we have that information, it will be presented in the upcoming annual budget. He will see exactly what has been converted to long-term, what the tenor of that is, and what the interest rate of that is. So again, there's no mystery in that.
I trust Exumas is satisfied to hit all the heads of your questions. Ken Allen Lumpkin to Salvador.
That's right, Mr. Speaker. My understanding was that this $80 million has already been done deal.
No, sir.
In the central bank.
No. Again, Mr. Speaker, again.
I think that's
again, let me
that's very important.
Yeah. Again, Mr. Speaker, $80 million of treasury bills, which is funds that are advanced by the central bank to the government, primarily for cash flow reasons, is to be converted into long-term debt, right? So when that happens, we will engage either financial institutions or bonds or other instruments to fund that, which then gives us the headroom back with the central bank to be able to engage in short-term financing as the need may arise during the year. Again, if you understand the government's financing, it's kind of cyclical. You can see where you're going to have periods of cash flow need and where you have periods of surplus. During that period of cash flow need, the government engages the central bank to provide cash flow to get through that period. And then as your revenue surplus comes back, you refund it. At the end of the year, you settle up. So either you're going to have a continued short-term position or you're going to convert to long-term. In this, and this accumulation doesn't happen in one year. This can happen over a number of years, as in this case, with this 80 million. All right? So we're now saying it is advantageous for us to convert this to long-term. So as a part of this exercise, we're asking Parliament to give us the approval to go out and get the long-term financing to pay back the short-term financing. And that's all that exercise is. So at some point, once that transaction has been done, then it will be presented to Parliament. And as I indicated already, that is a part of the annual budget exercise. All of that will be outlined.
Thank you, East Granville. Carolyn Rumkey in San Salvador. Which hand?
22.
22.
I just, because I indicated that the minister said some things about about
5 billion.
civil servant thing.
Yes, Carolyn.
And he said approximately $23 million was expended in December was lump sum payment to eligible citizens. So perhaps we need to align these five. That's not complete answer, fine. But I'm just saying that the response doesn't align with what we have to say in our
So,
East Granville.
so, Mr. Speaker, I believe the member again is apples and oranges. The statement in the communication is not one line. It's multiple ministries, multiple agencies. So this is in 22. We're just talking about Treasury. So the 23 that he's speaking about would be multiple agencies, multiple ministries.
I asked the guest speaker just to reflect upon your answer. And reflect upon what you said to come back. Because if you want me to read...
Mr. Speaker, I answered the question. I'm not sure what the member is trying to say. Reflect on what?
Chairman, you had suggested that I was dealing with apples and oranges.
Yeah.
And I asked you to give me the apples and I'll leave for the oranges. But I let you read what you said, then you could tell me, then you could, as it was, you could disassociate the apples and the oranges for me.
Mr. Speaker,
Yes, you said.
Mr. Speaker again.
You said.
There's the same. You just read it.
Yeah.
Continue. I mean, that's
Yeah.
This is the same state. This is the same statement, Carolyn.
opportunity. They said, well, let me think about it, but you all.
Yeah, that's the 1400. Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, I've already explained this. I don't know what's the difficulty. The communication speaks to the total.
Well,
The line item that the member has asked about reflects Treasury, the Treasury Department. So it would be part of the 23. And I'm not sure I understand what the challenge is.
Oh, your answer's coming out.
next. Exumas, Carolyn.
Speaker, head 28, Department of Inland Revenues. Speaker.
Yes.
Speaker, may I proceed?
You have 5 more minutes. You can carry on.
Speaker, in relation to the Department of Inland Revenue, we note there's an allocation for supplies and materials, an allocation for services in the line of the Department of Inland Revenue. Mr. Speaker, I wonder whether that is related to the needed repairs of the air conditioning for the Department of Inland Revenues on the island of Exuma that's been down, Mr. Speaker, for 2.5 years, whilst the Department of Inland Revenue must close at 1 o'clock instead of going a full day because of this. And I'm just wondering whether that 14,000 is designed to address this issue so that it does not recur.
He's going wrong.
How long you been in government?
Exuma was in it by the hurricane.
I love Exuma.
Answer his question, though, East Grand Bar.
But this does not include the repairs to that particular air conditioner. As he would know, we leased that accommodation. And so we would expect that the landlord would take care of that issue. But I would say to the people of Exuma, and particularly to the people of in the Inland Revenue Department, that we are aware of their issues and their discomfort. We do intend to find new accommodations for them, which unfortunately has taken longer than I anticipated. And again, I do apologize to them, but that is being addressed, and hopefully we'll have them out of there very shortly.
Even there, just 6 days, man.
If we extending, we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And we just act.
The chair recognizes the member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Chairman, seeing that we're approaching the 1 o'clock hour, Mr. Chairman, I can move that the speaker now takes the chair so that we can be able to move the resolution to continue with the subject of the chairman at that time.
It's been moved and seconded that the speaker do take the chair. As many members are in favor of being seated, those opposing will rise. Speaker will now take the chair.
We can just finish, right?
You have to moderate.
Yeah, let's finish. We only have 40 more heads. We only have 40 more heads to go.
Speaker begs leave to report that the committee made progress. A bag leaves.
Sit again.
Come on, we got
Sit again.
famous people want to know.
Honorable members, the deputy speaker, honorable members, the deputy speaker and chairman of the committee of the whole house has reported that the committee of the whole house is seeking leave to sit again. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do not move that the business of this house continues beyond 1 p.m.
Is there a seconder? Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this house do extend beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The business of this house will extend beyond the 1 p.m. hour. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the house once again resolve to self-parking the committee of the whole house and get these people to chair.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House with the deputy speaker and chairman of the committee of the whole House in the chair. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The House will now dissolve itself into a committee of the whole House with the deputy speaker and chairman of the committee of the whole House in the chair.
Committee of the whole. As many.
I try to get up still.
Chair recognizes the member for Exuma in Rankin Island.
Mr. Speaker, in relation to Head 30, but this might be a general question for the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. In the Prime Minister's in the Prime Minister's
Get back to you.
in the
So you can decide.
in the Prime Minister's speech today, Mr. Speaker, Chairman, he made a few announcements. One was that he had instructed the immigration minister to form a new strike force. The next one, and I'll incorporate all the questions in this one just for expediency, Mr. Speaker. The next question was the next point was in relation to pre-clearance in the USA. That's under another head, but no doubt it has some immigration implications for flights coming to the Bahamas. On the face of it, it appears a credible idea to pursue. And then, Mr. Speaker, there was one in relation to education where he spoke about $700 per student per month for preschool education. My question really is whether this supplementary budget provides for what appears to be some new initiatives, or whether these are blue sky ideas for the future, Mr. Speaker. Because we don't see the allocations being made in these estimates.
Again, Mr. Speaker.
Remember, I think it's anticipate the answer, but the chair recognizes member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will get back to the member, but I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, in respect to the pre-clearance issue, the entire cost or the bulk of the cost of the officers, and it was a customs officer that were placed in Florida, they were paid for, the accommodations was paid for by the airports themselves. In respect to the programs that the Prime Minister speaks to, they will all be included in the budget, the current budget of the Ministry of Immigration, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. So the government has not extended a budget in this particular regard. Those programs will have to fit within the existing parameters that the Ministry of Immigration has, moving around resources as necessary.
What about preschool money?
Preschool is included in the budget, in the original budget.
Thank you. Exumas Racket Island.
Preschool of Union.
Chair recognizes Cat Island, Rumkin, San Salvador.
Chairman, I know head 33.
Ministry of Public Works.
A new line item, 2511 10EE. Subsidies, public non-financial corporation. Now,
What are you looking at, sir?
nothing in it. 2511 0EE.
Zero.
What's there nothing in it? Huh? You serious? That is not enough. As you have to the previous budget, you remember looking at the wrong column.
Column.
Yes, you're right. Getting tired, man.
Supplementary estimates 2019, 2020. Zero.
I'm just looking at the wrong column. That's not the one. That's from the budget. No, that's.
What's the question then? What's the question, Cat Island?
That's the fact what I'm asking. Before you get exercise or what you can do. The question is, I have your draft estimate of revenue and expenditure, 219 to 20 that we debated in June, July of last year. And in it, you have the line item. Now, what we have here is line item 25110EE. Right? Subsidy, public, non-financial corporation. Is that what it says? Now, perhaps I'll give them that they don't have it. They don't say it anyhow. If I give you your draft estimate of revenue, and it will show me where that line item is in here.
Mr. Cat Island, member for Cat Island, I think you're addressing the government.
Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes East Grand Bahama.
Again, I'm not sure.
No.
Maybe the member can help us and ask a specific question.
The question is, Mr. Speaker, no, there's no line item. First, not no side market. The first point is, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, the first item this document purports. The first question, this document purports that we approved last June, July, 25 million in the Ministry of Public Works, 25 million for subsidies, public non-financial. That's what this document was to say. What I'm saying now, if you want me to say clear, is that that is not so. There is no such line item in your document in 2019-20. There's no sum of $25 million here. I give you the document. Look at it.
So you can confirm, but you make that clear. What y'all want to do?
I tried to get you all to exercise properly. Just listen. Look at it. Go to 5.
Listen, when they find out
25110 EP.
they couldn't record.
Are you looking for captions? Huh? We have a lot of people here helping us. With the captions.
It's actually in a different line. It's in 2511.
Chair recognizes the member for Carmichael.
I don't know.
You gotta use subsidies, one word.
That's what you
That's the subsidy. One word.
No, you have water to it. That's a different number. That's a different number.
Oh, he don't want to see more than two.
That's what they do.
That's the only thing they don't play.
Well, all I'm saying is, Speaker, see,
I think the member for Carmichael answered.
Speaker, I mean, I am asking a question about what is being presented to Parliament in respect to the People's Fund.
Yes.
And I'm trying to get an understanding of what this government is saying.
I think the member for Carmichael just answered.
Because he said it is water and sewage. Right? But water and sewage is under a head called subsidies to public. It says subsidies to public corporations. That's what this is saying. And I'm saying there's no number 25, that's a new line item. That's what I'm saying.
Even when the member continued
Chair recognizes.
line of question,
Sit down.
the line item he is talking about has zero for this supplementary budget. But the change in line item of this budget, the same 25 million is there, it's just in a different head. So there's no money difference, it's still there. No, zero in this budget. So we're doing an exercise.
No.
And government reserves the right to change its numbers. And line item. And line item. As it goes in the budget.
Right now, I thank the member.
But you know that.
Thank the member. No, I'm not saying, no, Mr. Speaker. No, I am. Mr. Speaker, I thank him. Right? But the point here is that it is a new number that's not shown him. If they are reallocating, that's all they have to say. I asked the question. Don't get exercise over it. Thank you, Mr. Nan, for bringing clarity.
I find who don't appreciate it. You never went through this exercise all the years.
As many.
You never did it.
As many.
Like holier than God.
No, I just.
Exhumus and Ragged Island.
Trying to paint a picture.
Sort of fine. Let's paint a picture.
Mr. Speaker.
You know, that's all it is. And what the picture is.
Perfect transparency is there. And then you,
Chair recognizes Exhumus and Ragged Island.
you now see
Speaker.
that you never saw before.
Mr. Speaker, the leader, I'm now referring to head 44, Mr. Speaker. The leader of the opposition pointed out in his presentation that the spending for social services benefit was significantly under the amount that was budgeted. Notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, we see an additional 9.8 million, and we are aware of the significant need across our country and how people are hurting, Mr. Speaker. I wonder, in the wake of Hurricane Dorian, whether the minister would opine as to whether he is satisfied that the additional 9.8 million is adequate to address all of the exigent needs throughout our economy.
Chair recognizes Southern Shores.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to go for a question because his leader would have asserted that compared to last year over the same period, the expenditure would not have been more as he anticipated it would have been. Expenses would have been a hurt. And I wanted an opportunity to speak to that, so I thank you. See, we had help.
Yeah, okay. The challenge is, Mr. Speaker, particularly in the two islands affected, the services and supplies and materials that would have been needed to give the requisite assistance would not have been available in those islands. So that would have been the first challenge. The second challenge is, even though such equipment and services have been coming in, the bills have not yet come in. So we've spent a whole lot of money that we've not yet paid for in Zuma and Kenai. And so while these figures are here, they do not reflect accurately the assistance that has been given to persons in that area. And so to your question now, Zuma, we continue to respond to the request. This is, in my humble opinion, a projection. I want to say to you that we do have the flexibility to make the necessary adjustments. And should we find that more funds are necessary, I'm satisfied that the good Minister of Finance will make the necessary adjustments so that we can continue to respond to the request and the suffering.
Many. Get out of them, Keith. El Salvador.
One of the reasons why I was exercising over that 25 minutes, I was hoping that some of that sustained the roadways. You know, Prime Minister, people of,
Before you left,
yeah, it is up. The people of El Salvador suggested that you were going to do the roads in the settlement, Coburn Town, Goodbye.
you should have left
Perhaps
that from Australia.
they want their clinic open.
Oh my God.
They want their roads fixed. You promised them that, they told me. When you went to see them, primarily delivering the message from them. Right? And so we hope.
You didn't even give them a promise.
The chair recognizes the member. The chair recognizes the member for Michael.
Oh,
You made a statement. I mean, he wants to respond.
I was talking to the Prime Minister.
He wants to respond. Michael wants to respond. So Michael.
Mr. Speaker, this plays something like how pushing. Minister of Public Works indicated his own constituents now he wants me to fix roads. Because
I talked to his
Minister of Public Works, I'm Deputy Prime Minister of Public Works is going to confer with the former Minister of Public Works. And I'm going to help him to fix his roads so he cannot. He is still my friend.
Mr. Speaker,
Chair recognizes East Grand Bahama.
two, in respect to this $25 million line item that the member continues to refer to, this budget is by block. It is not by line item. And this is why you would not have seen this particular line in the original budget, because the original budget would be by line, and that would have been public transfers to public corporations. This is a block, so it includes all of the items that would be included in that particular block. So that's why it shows differently.
No, Mr. Speaker. You ought to have allowed the explanation given by the member for the dance to remain.
The member can accept it or he can not accept it. That's up to him.
Go to head 38.
But I just gave the explanation of what it is.
Let me go to head 38, so he could understand what has happened. Right? What has happened, Mr. Speaker, is that they have changed the name of the the lines, from subsidies to public corporations to subsidy, and they have divided what they call non-financial corporations with private non-financial enterprise. And I did the lines, that's what you did. So,
So
The member obviously doesn't understand it. I would be happy to have the team explain it to him. But it is, this budget is not by line. What he is trying to compare is apples and oranges again.
see,
You can go to the line, and we can do that. This is by block. It's different.
Okay.
But there's no line, if you're talking, Mr. Speaker,
Yes.
there's no line. You can send a note to them right now and ask them to show me a line in the budget that we approved in 2019-20 that says subsidies, public non-financial corporation, subsidies to private non-financial enterprise. It ain't there. Just change the name.
Again, Mr. Speaker, again.
No, but he didn't say something
Again.
different.
We can allow East Grand Bama to give one,
Again.
try to give one final
This
explanation.
member is trying to compare two different presentations. The original budget that he's looking at is by line, individual line. This is presented by block. There's a difference. That's why you see this 221810EE. That's a different what do you call it? Item number altogether, because it is a block.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. What I've asked, let's move away from line and say block. Identify the block then, named, described as subsidies, public non-financial corporation, described as subsidies to private non-financial enterprises in the budgetary. We can't get back. No. Come talk to them. They'll show it to you.
Okay, I think we've exhausted this. I think we've exhausted this point. Any other line items? The chair recognizes Exumas and Ragged Island.
In relation to Ed 53, there have been one issue. This is the Port Department. One issue that I brought to the attention of the Honorable Minister of Transport some time ago. As an amateur boater, Mr. Chairman, I note that the Nassau Harbor in particular is filthy with debris. And I'm wondering whether there are any allocations in this current supplementary budget to address this. I noted it after the passing of the main budget, Mr. Speaker, and I'm wondering whether the minister is able to address it under the supplemental budget. That's my first issue. And the second question, Mr. Speaker, is in the wake of the tragedy in Exuma and all of the circumstances involving resources to staff up the Port Department, as well as the other related ministries, Mr. Speaker. I have recommended on occasion to the Minister of Finance in particular that we need a port of entry in Black Point, Mr. Speaker. And I've suggested to the minister responsible for the port that we need to beef up the supervision for boat licensing, for adequate enforcement of rules in relation to tours, etc. But, I'm not happy that I see enough supplement in this budget to support those changes. And I wonder whether the minister is going to delay this again.
Next.
Speaker, I didn't get that response.
I think chair recognizes Bamboo Town.
You say you can fix it. The people in regards to the number of
Let me say you get back to. Exuma's Exuma Ragged Island.
Grateful for his response, Mr. Speaker. I would only note that some of these matters are urgent. So I appreciate that he will get back to me, Mr. Speaker, and I trust that it will be in the near term.
They recognize Bamboo Town.
I have a lot of questions for that meeting.
Yeah. We had 76. We had some more, but we just want to. Not up to 76.
I want to start.
Yeah, and you moved the cap.
Yeah, but I thought you moved.
No, we moved the second to 74.
Okay, 74.
Which is the total.
Chairman.
Chair recognizes East Grand Bahama.
All right, I just wanted to give a clarification because I think I misled unintentionally Parliament on line head 21 in respect to the $30 million.
Head 21?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the question was what that was related to. It actually, and I indicated it was special
Skills enhancement.
skills enhancement. Actually, what that is the budget for the $1,400 allowance that we gave to the public service. It's the same as the $5 million for Treasury. And what it is that we spent $23 million of that that the member spoke to earlier. We were up to $23 million. So that's the explanation for that. I just wanted to make sure to clarify.
You have $7 million more.
Yes, we have $7 million more that we anticipate.
So those contract policemen will now get their.
We anticipate that there's some additional expenditure that will come through for the rest of the year.
Well, thank you very much, East Grand Bomber, for that clarification. As many. Chair recognizes Bamboo Town.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
1 second, one second. It's been moved and seconded that head 6 through 74 of the bill be agreed. As many members are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Head 6 through 74 of the bill is agreed. Chair recognizes Bamboo Town.
Once again, I do now believe that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many members in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The bill is agreed in its entirety. Bamboo Town.
Mr. Chairman, I do now move that the long time of the bill for an act for the appropriation of further than the sums of money for and the ones to bring the expenses for the government of Commonwealth to the Bahamas for capital development for the fiscal year commencing 1st of July 2019 and ending 30th of June 2020 be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the long time of the bill be agreed. As many members in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The long time of the bill is agreed. Bamboo Town.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that the short time of commencement be agreed. Mr. Chair, I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that the short title and the commencement of the bill be agreed. As many members in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The short title and commencement of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that clauses 2 and 3 be agreed. Mr. Chair, I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that clause 2 and 3 of the bill be agreed. As many members in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 2 and 3 of the bill is agreed. Bamboo Town.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that the schedule be agreed. And on page 95 of the supplemental budget, where the gap comes again, Mr. Chair, I do now move that head 5 through 74 be agreed.
And part 5 through 74, the bill be agreed. As many members in favor be. The chair recognizes the member for South and Central Andres.
Thank you. Through you to the member for East Grand Bahama. Under the Department of Housing, section head 45. I noted the commentary made by the member for Kalani earlier about the affordable homes in the Family Islands, in particular in Central Pines. We celebrate what's happening and also with East Grand Bahama. But also have some good constituents also watching in the great community of Mango Key. With all the infrastructure is already in for some years, and they're waiting for some relief with their subdivision in the community of Mango Key. And I'm looking at the numbers that are offered here, that are offered here by the good Minister of Finance. And I noted the fact that the member for Kalani noted that some 80,000 may be allocated or appropriated for construction of these homes to be built by Bahamians. I'm wondering if this number would be good enough to include areas such as what we anticipate happening in Mango Key and other parts of the great community of South Central and Mango Key. Thank you.
I think
It's Grand Bahama.
We don't operate like that.
Mr. Speaker, in head 45, there is no additional allocation with respect to the housing. But I'm sure that the Minister of responsible for housing would have listened to the plea of the people for South and Central Andres, and I'm sure that he will give due consideration to their needs as they've been neglected by the former administration for many, many years.
Mr. Chairman, you're supposed to protect members too.
decided by
Especially senior men.
especially senior men. That's
The
senior
chair
men.
doesn't see. You don't need any protection. You're good. You're good to go.
I'll move quickly now to
Yes.
head 54. Which should then go to the good member for Bamboo Town and the Department of Road Traffic. I would ask on each area of my district, especially the community of Mango Key and South, where they're still challenged with road traffic development, with personnel, proper equipment, and sometimes we still have to have persons traversing back and forth to get licenses done here in New Providence. I am wondering if this member for Bamboo has good, strong familial and lineage into the community of South Angeles in particular, would be able to give us some word of comfort if these numbers would therefore look at having the proper licensing facilities in the community of Southern Mango Key after so many years of being promised by both governments over here. So that'd be great. Glad for some relief in that regard. If these numbers could bring some relief to that community, particularly South and Central.
Where?
The lines don't get in this one. This thing I'm listening.
I want to thank the good member who represents our selective health down. I want him to know that South Angeles was not being forgotten. The matter of fact, the original budget was planned that we would expand services in the park throughout the country. And even though for my major budget speech presentation that I spoke about the department moving forward to putting the requisite laptops and cameras throughout so that we be able to then facilitate services to do. That's coming.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm head 56. This is an area, I'm a very practical member of Parliament here. 56 is one that I would look at, one I can follow. And I know my good friend, Mr. Prescott Smith, has been asking about this area because we've been very concerned about climate change and also the level of acidity and also the sea level rise. And the protection especially of bites and creeks in central Andros, where the member for Kalani would have visited a number of times. And persons in public meeting would express their concern about the level of contamination and development along those bites and creeks. So I'm asking through you, so the member for Marco City, a good friend of mine, we go way back. He's still very good at those soliloquies. We anticipate those days. We don't want you to count it again right now. Just count these numbers on this book. That we can look at some relief. So I can have some good word when I go back to Prescott and those in Central Andros this week. That we can look for some further protection of our creeks and bites. We've had these developments with the cruise ships and the cruise industry, for example. And we've seen the commentary by the Attorney General. But I think we need now to look at personnel. And hopefully the Prime Minister's mentioned the fact of getting, moving some of that brain trust that is abroad maybe back home to our society. We can maybe look at that. And anything I can do to maybe strengthen these figures so we can get the humans back home and help us protecting reefs, marine life in years to come. As I take my seat, and maybe you look for further improvement in these numbers, the continuation of the concerns in Central Angeles, especially with Ortec and its development there. We look for some level of having a symbiotic relationship is needed, of course, but many Bahamians, especially Andros and Central Angeles, are very concerned, and the proliferation of cancer, especially in that community. And so we like to have, we want to, between yourself and the member for Marathon, that we can have some strengthening in these numbers for more research to be done, especially locally. Maybe the strengthening of the personnel to help the Bahamian task force, so those whose remitted falls under that people out further strengthening by Bahamians, so we get real reports and our people can feel good, because like they said the other day in the meeting, we have a lot of people coming from these various conservancy groups who are giving us answers. And there's some level of trepidation about sometimes the report they're getting. So I'd like for the government to be more directly involved in this process. But if you can get more funding to get better personnel in, it'll be great.
All right, sounds okay.
Like, man, this is my question. You can't rush me now.
I'm watching you. You're giving a speech. You put.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
He's good.
The Minister of the Environment and the Minister of Agriculture will be doing a national tour. And this is included in that tour, so we'll be able to address some of those concerns during the public consultation in Central Angeles. Secondly, we are in fact getting additional funding. We're working jointly with some of the same NGOs that you mentioned and have been attracting resources. in order to check out the stock level of numbers of marine resources, how they're affected by various shocks, whether they are caused by human beings or they're environmental. So we'll be able to address some of those issues that we do intend to be in consultation with the fly fishing community, which submitted our problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Many.
Mr. Chairman, I would then go quickly to the subventions Annex 2. There, is that okay? Quickly, I can go quickly there on the Obama. Is that okay with you? Annex 2, the recurrent subventions. I just saw something that I want to do.
Raise it.
At the very end of it, vote on 129.
We haven't reached there.
Are you there yet?
We haven't reached there yet. It's been moved and seconded that the schedule and clause 5 through 74. Chairman. The chair recognizes Exumas and Raganati.
No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
It's being moved and seconded. Sorry, Bamboo Town, you said 5 through 74 or 5 through 54?
Confusion?
It's been moved and seconded that the schedule and clause 5 through 74 of the bill be agreed. As many members in favor remain seated, those opposing will rise. The schedule and clause 5 through 74 of the bill is agreed. Chair recognizes Bamboo Town.
Mr. Chairman, I do now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
You will get something that I have that work out.
That's it. The chair recognizes the member for South and Central, Mangrove Key, Andres.
Chairman, I just hope this falls within the personally asking. But I am concerned about in the annexes, Annex 2, and the recurrent subventions. There are one or two areas that I have some concerns about on page 129. The amounts allocated in subventions. I just want some, maybe that's very basic.
Which ones?
On 129.
Which ones? Which ones?
So there would be 282148 for the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas. Page
1 through 9.
129?
Yes. Annex 2.
Annex 2, recurring subventions.
Yes. And I would just like to, which would fall under my colleague from Western Bahamas, Germany. She would not be able to ask. She would maybe not have the, I don't know if she'd want to ask those questions. Sometimes you get a clue how it happens to the challenge. Yes, the challenge. This challenge many times in broadcasting many of the, what I call these community-based events, and finding sales and marketing issues challenging in many areas to broadcast these events, and the committees in these islands are many times challenged to have these events properly covered. I am wondering, as a public broadcaster, if the government would maybe have a figure that they can look at in the fiscal year that is forthcoming, that they can look directly at further increases in subventions, especially for coverage of events in the family violence, quickly. Secondly, then we want to quickly to the issue of the University of the Bahamas, which would be the 25-11-206 Operation University of the Bahamas. I see there seems to be a continuum of the same figure allocated for subvention there. And there's been a concern about attracting personnel. And is there a new vision for this? What about the intelligentsia, research papers, and injection of new personnel, in particular for University of the Bahamas? My concern has been, when I would serve as guild president at Mona, and a member from Carmichael would know of which I speak, and I would have moved between the Caryville and also the St. Augustine's campus. At least once annually, members, whether they've been persons like the Trevor Monroe and Carl Stone and Brian Meeks and others, had to publish a paper at least once a year, and every 3 years you were actually given, I won't say a forced sabbatical, where they had to publish some kind of document. And I'm wondering if we can't say the same with the brain trust that we have now at the University of the Bahamas. Are we attracting the bright and best minds to this university, the University of the Bahamas? And with these numbers, with the subvention, I don't know if there's any mark increase, because the government is giving quite a bit of assistance and maybe exemptions now. I'm just wondering about it quickly, maybe I can get some response. And finally, Public Parks and Beaches Authority, Mr. Chair. There's a continuum also for the same figures. And I am looking now for the day when public parks and beaches will not only include New Providence, but also the Family Islands.
I got plenty good beaches, what we call bay, along the beach in Kemp's Bay, and I need to be scraped and clean like the same bay do Long Wharf. And so we have to, and then what are the beaches and these cemeteries and our land and historical landmarks in these family islands.
Yeah.
And I don't know for West Grandma, I wouldn't mind defending her this time. You can't answer the answer for you, my friend. But the fact of the matter, the parks and beaches got to go beyond New Providence, man.
Amen.
And we got to be able to have parks and beaches and the family islands.
Yes.
The visitors are in this family island.
Yes.
They're in my constituency riding bicycle today at the new area that is open. And our parks and beaches are in bad shape in the family islands. And local government cannot afford it. There are couple local government can't afford it. I feel very strongly about it. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, sorry, through you, the member for East, where I was also an island boy. I wish we could have an extension of some funds. The member for Yamapaugh, my MP, would not understand this. He's in town. He wouldn't know why. Yamapaugh Beach is he would understand. And he's fixing his park very well in the front of my house. He got pumpkin and everything. I do the same thing in Andros, man. Let's get in good parks in South Andros and Mangrove Key in my constituency. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Okay, broadcasting, University of the Bahamas and Parks and Beaches. The chair recognizes East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think the member is well aware that we have been a challenge for many, many years, including under the former administration. We are trying to rationalize that corporation to see how we can bring it to a point where it can be self-sustaining. And in the interim, we continue to provide subventions to the corporation. So I know that the parliamentary secretary responsible, the member for West End and Bimini, is in fact trying to bring some creativity and business focus to that entity. And we'll see what happens in the new budget as we look at all of the corporations to determine how we can bring them to a cost recovery status. But it is true in all the corporations that we need to have a fresh look and be real with ourselves, be real with the Bahamian people about the status of these corporations and what it's going to take to get them to the point where they are in fact cost recovery entities. With respect to the University of the Bahamas, I don't think that we can speak much to that at the moment. Safe to say that I believe they're in union negotiations at the moment. And so we'll leave that right there in respect to the University of the Bahamas. In respect to beaches and parks, I do share the frustration of the member for South and Central Andrews. To the extent, Mr. Speaker, that the subsidy that is provided to the local government, who is charged with these kinds of activities on the family islands, is not nearly adequate. And we recognize that. Certainly, this Minister of Finance recognizes that. We will continue to look at it, Mr. Speaker. However, we do operate within an overall budget framework, and so that limits us to some extent. But I take the views of the member very, very seriously, as it does also affect my own constituency as well as all of the members from the family islands. The equity between New Providence and the family islands is interesting, but I'm going to leave that right there before I get into trouble and say that we will look at it as we go into the new budget.
It's been moved and seconded that the bill be agreed in its entirety. As many members are in favor of being seated, those opposed will rise. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Mr. Chairman, I do not move that that the Speaker takes the chair.
Do I have a seconder? It's been moved and seconded that the Speaker now do take the chair. As many members are in favor of being seated, those opposing will rise. The Speaker will now take the chair.
Leave the report that the committee has gone through the bills, making no amendments They approved.
Honorable members, the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of Committee of the Whole House has reported that the Committee of the Whole House has gone through the bills, having made no amendment thereto. Third reading and passing of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on revenue account during the fiscal year commencing 1st of July 2019 and ending the 30th of June 2020.
Mr. Speaker, I second that.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time. A bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on the revenue account during the fiscal year commencing the 1st of July 2019 and ending the 30th of June 2020. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a third time.
A bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of Bahamas on revenue account during the fiscal year commencing 1st of July 2019 and ending 30th of June 2020.
Order that the bill do now pass and the title thereof be declared to be Supplementary Appropriation 2019-2020 Recurrent Account Expenses Act 2020. For the third reading and passing of bills, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for capital development for the fiscal year commencing 1st of July 2019 and ending June 30th, 2020.
Is there a seconder? Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and pass. A bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for the capital development for the fiscal year commencing the 1st of July 2019 and ending the 30th of June 2020. As many as in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a third time.
A bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for capital development for the fiscal year commencing 1st July 2019 and ending the 30th of June 2020.
Order that the bill do now pass and the title thereof be declared to be the Supplementary Appropriation 2019-2020 Capital Development Account Expenses Act 2020. For the third reading and passing of bills, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further third readings.
Consideration of Senate amendments. Resolutions. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Created significant damage to the infrastructure of personal property and residents of Africa and Grand Bahama. And whereas the government has found it necessary to undertake additional borrowing to finance
Hurricane Dorian recovery and reconstruction efforts to cover lost revenue. And whereas Section 4 of the Parliamentary Stock Act of 1952 describes the conditions under which the Minister of Finance may borrow any stock of money or part thereof by creation and issue of registered stock. And whereas from time to time the House of Assembly will approve borrowing by way of loan agreements by finance approved expenditure. And whereas by Section 18 of the Financial Administration Loan Act 2010, on the 26th of 2010, it is provided that no loan should be raised by the government and no guarantee involved in financial liability shall be binding upon the government unless entered into the prior approval, signified by resolution of the House of Assembly thereof. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the House, 1, authorizes the Minister of Finance to raise by way of loan or loan the sum of $587,900,000 in aggregate in such terms as the Minister may determine. 2, authorize the Minister to raise such amounts by way of A, creation and issue of registered stock under Section 4 of the Parliamentary Stock Act, Chapter 362. B, loan agreements with banks, including commercial banks, on such terms as are mutually agreed. And C, provides that the aggregate increase in sums owed by the government from amounts borrowed under paragraph A to B do not exceed the sum of $587,900,000 in the currency of our bonds. To draw down under the Inter-American Development Bank contingent credit line for natural disaster emergencies. And after offsetting debt amortization in such amounts as may be necessary to amortize or refinance existing debt, and the House of Assembly receives communications from the Minister of Finance on the earliest opportunity after the apportionment among paragraphs A and B, and 3, approves the proceeds of said loans being used for the purposes of covering revenue losses and defraying expenditure for recovery and reconstruction efforts as a result of Hurricane Dorian. So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be passed or be approved. Whereas Article 129, subsection 1 of the Constitution requires the Minister of Finance before the end of each financial year to cause to be prepared annual estimates of revenue and expenditure for the public services during the succeeding financial year, which shall be laid before the House of Assembly, and which estimates have been laid before the House of Assembly. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House approves the proceeds of the said loans being used for the purpose of covering revenue losses and defraying expenditure for recovery and reconstruction efforts as a result of Hurricane Dorian. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The resolution is agreed. Further resolutions.
Next resolution, please.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Whereas the government of, sorry, Mr. Speaker, I move this following resolution. Whereas the government of the Commonwealth of Bahamas proposes to enter into a loan agreement between the government, the borrower, and Caribbean Development Bank as lender for a sum not exceeding the equivalent of $15 million in the currency of the United States of America for the purposes of refinancing financing a program to support the borrower in implementing a number of policy reform initiatives designed to achieve fiscal stability and enhance social and climate change resilience against natural disasters and hazards in the Bahamas, the project. And whereas the Caribbean Development Bank has agreed to grant the government the proposed sums to finance the project, and whereas by virtue of Section 18 of the Financial Administration Loan Act 2010, no loan should be raised by the government and no guarantee involving a financial liability for binding upon the government, and has entered into the prior approval of the House of Assembly signified by resolution thereof. Now therefore be it resolved that this House, 1, authorizes the Minister of Finance to raised by means of a loan the sum of $50 million in the currency of the United States of America, and two, authorizes the Minister of Finance to raise such loan by entering into a loan agreement with the Caribbean Development Bank on such terms pursuant to this resolution as are mutually agreed. So moved.
Second, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. Whereas the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the government, proposes to enter into loan agreement between the government as borrower and the Caribbean Development Bank as lender for the sum not exceeding the equivalent of $50 million in the currency of the United States for the purpose of financing a program to support the borrower in implementing a number of policy reform initiatives designed to achieve fiscal stability and enhance social and climate change resilience against natural disasters and hazards in the Bahamas. The project, now therefore be it resolved that this House authorizes the Minister of Finance to raise such loan by entering into a loan agreement with the Caribbean Development Bank on such terms pursuant to this resolution as are mutually agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The resolution is agreed. Further resolutions. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further resolutions.
Members' statements. The chair recognizes the honorable member for North Eleuthera.
Mr. Speaker, I do thank people of North Eleuthera who sent me here to represent them in this House. They expressed their concern. I wish to announce that we will be having an important branch meeting at Harbor Island at 7 p.m. this evening at Harbor Island Morning. On a more somber note, Mr. Speaker, I want to convey condolences to the family of the former member of Parliament, Dalvin Smith, whose brother Keith Smith passed and was buried this past Saturday. I also want to convey condolences to the family of Shelley Saunders Lewis, who also was interned this past Saturday in Harbor Island. But more so, Mr. Speaker, I want to announce and to convey condolences to my wife on, I know it's kind of difficult to say convey condolences, but I want to announce the passing of my wife's mother, Mrs. Olga Hayes, who was the last sibling of the original Pacetti family from Harbor Island. She will be buried this Saturday in Harbor Island at 7 p.m. 11 a.m. at the Wesley Methodist Church.
Want to march for Senate as a
The Pacetti family is a well-known family.
next week.
He has played until under. There used to be a PRC family. I think I've divided that. Nonetheless, putting politics aside, she has been an outstanding person in the community, and I wish to convey condolences to that family. I also want to wish condolences to Mr. Clay Smitty on the passing of his grandfather, Wendell Hayes. May all of these individuals find comfort and solace in the relationships they had while they were here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, honorable member. There being no further member statements, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamaco.
Speaker, what I would just like to make one announcement, three announcements. On this coming Saturday, in the park on Friday, where the naming didn't invite me in southeastern, the eastern district of Nassau. I do apologize, Speaker, to the senior man, the member of one of my most ardent supporters and advisors in the Yamaha community. But I do have an announcement for the past that would stem from what what I did say. I'm sorry that you did not get your personal invitation for the naming of the Peggy Phillip Park. Well, but on this coming Saturday, Mr. Speaker, we raised more than $25,000 to start a band that will be focusing on the young persons of Yamacross. That band will be known as the Houston Community Rising Star Band. No, there's a new day in Yamacross. I will not get behind me. The speaker is focusing on discipline, dedication, drive, and determination. We decided to start a community band for the Eastern community. Out of that band, South and Central Andros was just indicated, you will be coming to the park near him, Twynham Park, where we created one of the largest backyard farming projects and a nature trail. So the sign will soon go up for theater in the park. And I'm challenging the young person who will be joining our band. I want to thank all of my police officers for trying to come together to support me. I will be up next month, and I know the Minister of National Security will make the announcement of Police Month on next month. We'll be signing the basketball and still a police officer, former police officer, once a police officer, always. But they're going to be assisting us with that band. Always. And the sign will go up this month, Mr. Speaker, for theater on the park. At the park near South and Central Andros. I made a promise to the young men.
You see with my head, what? Check my head.
Create a band. So we're going to introduce the first band invitational that will be held along the Commonwealth Boulevard Strip. And so we're setting the date 1 year from now. And we're challenging ourselves for that. So this coming Saturday, we will be at the Colony Village Park, Sun Glow Drive. One of my warriors, Mr. Speaker, and most ardent supporters in the person of Ms. Anne herself. She's just a loved one, a cousin past, and I would like to extend condolences to myself. There will be a number of announcements that we will be making for continued activities in the Yamacross. So I just want persons to stay tuned. I want to thank my team who are working extremely hard. We must stay together because we are ready and prepared for 2022, and we will take no prisoners. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
Speaker, thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to advise the good residents of the Exuma Schools that I will be visiting with them tomorrow, the 25th, the 26th, and the 27th. So I will be conducting him visits if anyone wish to see specifically. They're invited to call my office security to ensure that I visit with them. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to commend those working on the Exuma Pride movement in Exuma. They're working diligently on the rebuilding of the Lake Victoria Park, as well as certain upgrades in the Regatta Park, Vivo, etc. I'd like to recognize especially Red Smith, Field, Turnpike, Sheila Moss, and Matthew, Don Road, beyond her. Mr. Speaker, we are transforming the town of Georgetown into one of the most pristine and beautiful towns. The Hulumo Street when you visit, you will recognize that you arrived somewhere very special as a result of the hard work of the human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
The Andros Pride. Okay. Yeah, that's going
Appointment of select committees. Instructions to select committees. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Mangrove Key, South and Central Andros.
Speaker, at this time, we'd like to make the house one of all those standing in the name of my opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I renew all matters in the name of the government and moves, Mr. Speaker, that the House adjourns till 10 a.m. Wednesday, 4th of March, 2020.
Second that, Mr. Speaker.
honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House adjourns to Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 4th of March, 2020. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Final adjournment.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the House adjourns.
Second. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House adjourns to 10 a.m. 4th of March, 2020. As many as in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The House stands adjourned to 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 4th of March, 2020.
All right.